Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Carpinteria Valley Water District to order. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Bob.
Director Holcomb?
Here.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Roberts?
Here.
Director Balch?
Here.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes. Then we got item number 3, public forum. Any person may address the board of directors on any matter within its jurisdiction which is not on the agenda. Done. Then we got item number 4, the consent agenda. The minutes of the regular board meeting held on March 13, 2024.
Holly motions for approval. Shirley seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? A roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Abstain.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
Motion carries 401.
Then we got item number 5, unfinished business, none. And then I hereby adjourn to the regular meeting of the Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Number 6, call the meeting to order. Public forum, any person may address the board of directors on any matter of business jurisdiction which is not on the agenda. Scott, you wanted to speak on this one?
Thank you. Scott Vanderkar. I missed last meeting, I apologize, and I'm sort of doing a little bit of catch-up, but 2 points I just wanted to bring out at this point. Thank you. And the first being, on Saturday, the Carpinterian of the Year event was held, and agriculture was highlighted as being a large part of what makes Carpinteria special and appealing. And so I think it's worth noting that seems a little late, but finally they are recognizing that. And it brings it right back to what we're dealing with, water, agriculture, groundwater, and how important that has been to the history of Carpinteria and continues to be. My second point is this article that I thought you'd find interesting. It really comes on the heels of some comments that Director Johnson made 2 meetings ago when we were talking about evapotranspiration and water use by crops, and she, I thought, insightfully brought forth some points about it isn't just evapotranspiration, it isn't just crop needs. The whole water picture is complicated and intertied, and this article points to some of those things, particularly from the view of the agricultural community. Of particular note, I would bring to your attention the paragraph that mentions the 25 million, it starts out 25 million feet of water consumed to grow food on the state's 7.8 million irrigated acres. That comes out to 3.21 acre feet per acre. And just as a foundational point, we're in the ballpark when we're talking about avocados in the 2 acre feet, 2.5 acre feet per acre, even below a state average. So I thought those were pertinent points. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Then we got item number 3, approval items. 3A, minutes of the meeting of the board held on March 13, 2024.
I have a question about the minutes.
Sure.
On page 4 of 7 of the packet, and I'm not sure if my memory is correct. Carolyn Frary addressed the board with concerns of why meters are not required the cost to install them and paying for groundwater that growers are not using. So I had the impression that she was of the opinion that meters were the most accurate way to control and to gauge this, but this sentence, I don't know, how do we read this? Is she in favor of meters or not on this quote?
I can comment on that. We can clarify that sentence. Yes, she was in favor. I think her argument was that it's the most accurate way to determine who's using groundwater. So I think she had concerns why they're not required, is what
Yeah,
that sentence is
that's
trying to say.
what my impression was, but when I read the sentence, it sounded like the opposite somehow, so.
Yeah,
if we can make it a
the
little
second
more-
clause there, the cost to install them and paying for groundwater that growers are not using, I think is a little bit confusing, so we can clarify that. I
Yeah,
think
she was
what-
giving her reasons about why meters are not required. This is the way I read
No,
it.
yeah.
But when I heard her, I thought she was in favor of meters as being the most accurate way. So, okay,
Yeah, I think
I
the
understand.
argument against not having meters, double negative there, is that, growers are paying for groundwater that they're not using.
yeah, okay.
But I'll note that and we'll make the change.
So I move to approve the minutes with that adjustment.
Polly seconds.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? And then roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Abstain.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
Motion carries 401.
And number 4, unfinished business, none. Item number 5, 5A, consider draft budget for the year 2025-2026. For information, Bob?
Yeah, it's up on the screen here. Unfortunately, it's really small text, so I apologize for that. It's also in your packet. This is the draft fiscal year 25 and 26 budget for the GSA, and so wanted to get this to you early so you could look at it. It's also used in the basis of the fee determinations, so you can kind of look at the breakdown of the costs. Costs are generally escalating with inflation over from the adopted budget for fiscal year '24, and then of course '25 and '26 are projected and proposed. There are a few changes that I wanted to note. The '25, we are intending to have fewer GSA meetings. We'll see if that happens. So the director fees went down a bit. But then in '26, we expect the activities to start picking up again as we start doing projects and management actions. Let's see. We did get feedback on the annual report to see if we can do more of that work in-house. So you do see the cost coming down. We have worked with the consultant to understand what parts of that annual report we can do in-house. So it has, it is reducing, as you see on the year over year. I think that's about it. One other thing I will note, on the bottom, there's debt service shown in this budget, and those are the loan being paid off, that CVWD loan to the GSA. And after '26, it will be paid off, and as well, the GSA will have about $200,000 in reserve, so it can actually, function without cash flow issues. The auditors last year wanted us to also put as part of the budget the labor allocation, since we do share labor with the GSA. And so this is the look at the labor allocation. We don't expect it to change very much from now to the next 2 years. So I'll take any questions on that.
I have A question about the $65,000 GSA administration professional services. And this is GSA administration. Does that include monitoring wells and all the technical monitoring and things like that?
No, that's the audit and rate consultants. So mostly the audit, though. The
Wolf?
audited financials.
That's Wolf, right?
It's
Do I have it right?
EPW, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was much less, because that's about as much as well, it's around $30,000 for the district,
Yeah,
and the GSA is
so Norma's telling me it's under 10,000, so I think maybe that was, the rest of that is.
okay.
Is
Thank
Ref
you.
Dallas, yeah.
That's kind of what I remembered, that it was much less. Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else, any questions?
Yeah, what was the step up in that was the administrative professional services, right? What's the step up in the professional services? The 10 to 50?
Yeah, so we have a couple of initial projects that we expect that we'll be doing. So the first thing in the GSP is to rank and prioritize all of the projects listed in the GSP, so we can figure out what it's going to cost and when and how long we will do it.
Polly or Matt, any questions?
Oh, he answered it. I had the debt service question too, so thanks for that.
Okay, Bob, I got a question on if the GSA wants to encourage private pumpers to install ion water compatible meters, and we possibly maybe are able to maybe pay $500 towards that. That needs to be in this budget for that to happen, or is that something that we can do later?
Yeah, we could put that in this budget. We haven't proposed that. We could also go after grant. The way I've always envisioned it is we would get money for grants from grants to support that kind of a program.
Because right now, the county's got $500 available per
Right.
meter, and then if we want to encourage people to use ion water compatible systems, there will be grants available for that?
There's going to be groundwater management grants available, so that would be a good that would be a project that would fit well with grants.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Scott, do you wanted to speak?
I was going to speak when we get to the fees portion, which is the next item.
Got it, okay. So then we move on to item 5B, consider determination of the GSA fee for 2025, 2026. For information, Bob?
Yeah, so as you recall, in 2022, we had, 2023, we had fees were based on acreage of parcels. And so we've moved away from that this year and next year to estimated pumping. And so we went through a series of steps to determine who had wells and what the estimated pumping was. And we came up with a number for both fiscal year in 25 and 26. Those are based on trailing years. Fiscal year 22 is what we use for fiscal year 25, and fiscal year 23 is what we use for fiscal year 26. And that's just a data availability kind of thing that we had to, go back 2 years, 2 fiscal years in order to get the full year. We just talked about it, but we see the budget there. It says amended budget. It's not actually amended, it's the proposed budget. And as you saw, 485 for fiscal year 25 was the revenue needed, and 500 for fiscal year 26. We also looked at the district's pumping. So in 22, we were still in a pretty severe dry period, and so the water district was still pumping a lot of water. In that year, it pumped almost 1,977 acre feet. But then in fiscal year '23, it was a wetter year, so the pumping went down significantly. And so you can see that number, 1,291. So we add those two years together, and we got a total over 2 years of 3,268 for the district. And this is one of the reasons why we went with the 2-year budget was the big change in the climactic conditions. So 1 year was very high pumping, and we didn't want the charge to be very low for this year and then very high for next year. So rather than do that, we just took the 2 years together and are going to set the fee so it's the same for the 2 fiscal years. Then moving on, the private pumping estimates. So for fiscal year '22, it was for private pumping was 5,568. Again, a very dry year, high need for irrigation water. So that drove the pumping up. And then fiscal year '23 was 3,660. So a total over 2 years of about 9,230 acre feet. So you add those, the private pumping and the water district's pumping together, and a total over 2 years of 12,500 acre feet, roughly 12,500 acre feet was pumped. And then again, you take the 2-year needed revenue for the budget, which was 985,000. You simply divide that by 12,497. You get the fee of 7882. We rounded it up to 79. So that will generate the needed revenues, maybe a little bit more in fiscal year 25. But we'll have, we'll be able to carry that money over. And unlike the water district, the GSA doesn't have debt covenants that we need to meet coverage ratios, so it's not as big of an issue. The last column's the number of parcels that will be assessed the fee based on whatever the pumped estimate is for those parcels. You'll notice that it changes from 1 year to another. So in '25, it's 355, and '26 it's 348. And that's because there are a few parcels in there that were, their estimated value was, around an acre foot. And because the pumping went down so much, they basically dropped off. So there were, I think, 7 parcels that drop off in the second year. So that's the basis. You'll see when we talk about the notice that we used $79 per acre foot as the proposed fee for the 2 years. So I'll take any questions.
Ollie, you got any questions?
I did notice that, thank you.
What?
I'm good, oh, sorry.
Well, I'm concerned about the accuracy of it, and I guess it's just an individual circumstance, so I'll talk to you about that
Sure.
offline.
Okay, Shirley?
Yeah, I have so this new billing changing from per acre to per acre foot pumped is going to take effect after 6/30/26 or after 6/30/25 or?
It's actually going to take effect in 2024. So fiscal year starts with, so for fiscal year '25, it starts July 1, 2024. So
Okay, so it's starting in fiscal year '25. Okay, 6/30/25.
24. We'll start collecting the money in 2024 in October. The mechanism in which we collect the money is through the tax roll, and the tax assessor sends out a bill in October. And so that's the first round of collection. And then again in April, I believe it is, they send out a second notice or bill.
Now I'm confused. I was of the impression that when we switched to volumetric pumped, is that it would no longer be a property tax issue, billed to the property.
Yeah, it's not a property tax, it's a fee, but it.
A fee.
The mechanism in which we collect it is still the same.
It's still the
Yeah.
same. Oh, I misunderstood. I thought it was going to discontinue, so.
Yeah, it'll only be 400 parcels, so not everyone will see this show up on their bill, on their tax bill, like they did last year.
So, so the billing matrix will start 7/1/24, but I won't see it on my bill till 6/30/25. Is that right?
Well, when you say your bill, do you?
Well, yeah, anybody's bill, yeah.
For the parcels, they'll,
Mm-hmm.
the first time they will see the bill, it will be October of 2024, is that right? Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then it's, like you say, it's trailing, so that's when you're figuring it, okay. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies.
Okay, see any questions? Okay, then I like to, all the private pumpers supposedly got an estimate of what the district think they're gonna be pumping by estimate, either avocados or greenhouse, and we used our current meter usage to calculate those numbers. But nobody will be able to prove that they're different for another 12 months. So starting in July, they need 12 months to prove that they did not, or did, if they use more, they gotta, next year we can bill them for more, or for that matter.
Well, again, we're basing it on trailing years, so we've already determined for fiscal year '26 that we're using fiscal year '23.
Right, but I think most of the private pumpers I've talked to, everybody's in favor of going to the pumping charge, that as long as everybody pays for what they truly pump, and it's gonna be 12 months before we get to that point, before a pumper can come to us and say, hey, what you're assessing me is wrong, this is what I'm truly pumping, but every year it's gonna be the same problem, because we're always a year behind.
Yes, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with a representative share for each parcel that's pumping groundwater. And so we can't use the current year because we wouldn't be able, the method that we collect the money, we have to get that bill to the counties for them to put it on the tax roll by June of this year. So we won't be able, for fiscal year '25, it doesn't even start till July 1st. So we have to go back, and even if we go back using '24, that doesn't work because we don't have all the data by the time we need to get all of the analysis done and get it to the county. So we have to go back 2 years. So that's why we're going back multiple years as a representative fee. And so it's basically impossible, even with meters, it wouldn't be possible to do it current year.
Right, but it's going to be somewhat of an, how say that, tug of war, because we're always a year behind. Avocados, if it rains, will use less water. Greenhouses most likely will use about the same. So I'm not so sure that our private pumpers understand that these are estimates, and if they want to change that, they're always going to be a year behind. Can they come back a year afterwards and say, hey, I didn't use that much?
They can come back, for example, if they get the bill and they see it and they say, that doesn't make sense, they can come back and file. It'll be just like we had before. They can file an appeal for that year to show that in 2022 or '23, they didn't use that much water.
Right, so it'd be 12 months after they can prove that they either used, well, they're not going to come tell us when they use more, they're going to tell us when they use less.
No, it wouldn't be 12 months. It would be in October. October will be the first time they actually see the amount of the fee, and then they can call me or Danielle and say, what is this fee? And we can explain it to them, and they can say, oh, that's not right. We don't have a well, or we didn't pump. So then we would have them fill out an appeal form, and then we would evaluate that. And if so, the way that we've been doing it is we then we cut a check back to them so that,
Right, but unless the pumper can prove to the district that they use less water, which they'll need 12 months of history.
well, yeah, if they don't have, I think I understand your question. If they don't have some sort of proof that they didn't use the water, but they have a well, for example, then, typically we would not approve an appeal. If they said, oh, I didn't use that much water in 2022, we really can't accept that as a valid appeal. They would have to show us some evidence that they did not pump in 2023.
Right, but for the avocado growers, it's always going to be a moving target because every year will be different.
Yeah, but it's in the past. So, the bill, the amount is based on a past year, so they're not going to be waiting for this year. I think that's where the confusion is here, is I think you're thinking it's somehow tied to this year's use, but it's not. It's tied to
Right, no, but
previous year's
you're
use.
projecting from an earlier year, but if the pipe pumper comes in with a 12-month history, July of next year, then they have a valid reason for an appeal.
No. No, the base year, or the basis year is fiscal year '22. It's not '25 or '26. It's not the current year, because, again, there's no way to do that, so, or we would be dealing with the issue you're talking about, where everybody comes in and says, oh, you know what, you're off, because we don't have any data for 2025. We're not trying to project 2025. We're saying, as a representative year, 2022, this is what we determined you pumped for your parcel.
Right, but since there are no meters in the valley, there's going to be a lot of I understand the part
Yeah.
about.
Well, and we did, we went through a process where we did estimates, and we sent out maps to everyone, and we said, is this what you pumped? And we did get a lot of feedback from people with records saying, no, that's not right. And so we went through each one of those responses to our letter and evaluated it and made adjustments.
But how do you know that the pumpers' meters are accurate?
Well, yeah, again, you're kind of jumping ahead. That's something that we want to develop in the next 2 years, is a well registration program and possibly a meter program. In that meter program, we would have requirements to calibrate and test meters so that they're accurate.
But obviously, there were growers that could document that they use less water in '22 then. And that's why you were able to.
Yeah. So, for example, there were some folks who had records of the zones, written records of the zones that they used, showing, have 200 emitters on this line, and I ran it for, 10 minutes on, every other Wednesday, or what, basically enough for us to do some rough calculations, and come up with, okay, it looks like you were using less water.
Okay, so we're on the honor system then.
Well, it's not on the honor system. We do have to have some data. There were other folks who didn't have wells, who said, well, I don't have a well, so I can't be pumping grounders. We went out and looked at those sites, and walked the field, or whatever particular the use was, just to make sure that there was no well.
Okay. Scott, you want to speak?
I'm afraid to.
Yeah, Scott Vanderkar. I have all those same questions. Great questions, Shirley and Case both. And it is confusing, and I guess this gives us a little feel for what's needed for the public meeting that's going to be held, because these are the kinds of questions that are going to be asked. And I have not seen in the minutes, and I haven't heard, if I remember correctly, the board asked for management to come up with a plan to get meters on the wells. Mm-hmm. Has there been a report back as to a timeline or any of those details yet? No.
Not yet, no.
Okay. Because, yeah, that's just what we're talking about. And so I'm wondering if a grower does put a meter on, does have it calibrated professionally, if that is an incentive, if that's allowable and an incentive for growers to be charged accordingly, water used.
Yeah. If it's-
And through the
yeah,
appeal
yeah,
process.
There was a couple of growers that had calibrated, records of calibration and testing with a meter, and that was provided as evidence.
Okay, so that as an example at this meeting would be great, something like that. And last question. How, if at all, does this plan match up to what you learned from your aerial survey of, as an example, a 10-acre piece having 10 acres farmed versus a 10-acre piece where 3 acres is farmed? Did that project change this approach?
I'm assuming you're talking about the ET work, or I'm not clear. what
Well,
you're talking
I'm thinking of we've got a $68 per acre, now $79 per acre. So I guess the question is that per acre in line with what you learned with that aerial survey information?
Well, I mean, it's close, so I was actually surprised that it was as low as it was. I assumed that there was less groundwater being pumped, but as you can see, we're on the order of about 6,000 acre feet a year, which is about 2,000 acre feet of additional water that's been pumped. I assumed when we were doing the per acre base fee that it was closer to 4,000, but again, the fee itself is close, but the distribution of those fees is quite different from the way we were collecting it before.
Okay. Still confused, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and enlighten with your suggestions on what might be presented. Maybe we should use the visual project management format where you have the, not just the fiscal year, but the fiscal year, the calendar year, and when the charges are accrued and when they're going to be billed. So you have the colored lines going this way, and they'll all line up with the billing. I mean, it's really hard even, for me to visualize that. And that you're starting with the first 2 years consolidated because they were such radical years, but then after that, it'll be, I understand, it'll be year by year. And maybe include the date of, when they'll get the bill and when they can raise objections. And it's to get started anyway, because it really is, and because you also have the county property tax, their timing to consider as well.
Yeah, we can work on a timeline graphic.
Yeah, like a a project management, vehicle, yeah.
Casey?
So I'm understanding it. So best case scenario, I put a meter on a well this month. And best case scenario, I can't utilize that data for 2 years?
Well, yeah, so if we continue with the method that we're using, which is estimating, yes.
Right,
If
okay.
we go to meters, then we might be able to tighten it to one, the
Squeeze a
previous
little
years.
closer.
yeah.
Okay, and then, so what would happen, like, if I buy a parcel and they were growing fruit and needed a bunch of water, and then I capped the wells? Am I gonna be stuck with their fees?
No, I think in that case, you could probably appeal and say, I no longer benefit from, so there's a category of appeal where you claim, I don't take groundwater and I don't intend to take groundwater, so therefore I shouldn't be paying a groundwater management fee. It's on the appeal form, it's a checkbox, you check the box, and once you've checked that, you're off. Now, you have to by doing that, you have to sign it as an affidavit. It's a legal document that shows that you're not pumping groundwater. So if you do, then that's actually a violation of the rule.
Will, you want to speak? Go ahead.
I'm Will Carlton. I have a farm. I'm concerned about the basis for the increases. The incremental amount looks to be 40%.
Sorry. No, the incremental, oh, you're talking about on the fee or on the
On the fee.
budget? Okay.
It was from 64
No.
to 78.
I
That's
think it's
for
60, I think it's
30%.
68 to 78, yeah. That 64 is actually one of the numbers used for averaging, so it's 64 plus 100 divided by 2. So the old fee was 68 last year.
What I want to point out to all of you is that whatever the incremental increase is, it's, should be, the same amount of expense increase should go along with that. In other words, if he has to pay wages and salaries and so forth that go up 6 or 10 or 12%, I can understand my bill going up 6 or 12 or 14% or whatever it is. But I want to make sure that you, when I saw that $100 number, when I thought to myself, well, now that is 40+%. And does that mean that the head count at the water department is going up 40%? Does that mean the expenses are going up 40%? All of those things are running around in my mind, and I'm sure, I'm not saying that it's not under good management, but I do believe that you have to keep pressure on management to make sure that those numbers move in lockstep with one another. So, thank you.
I agree with that principle. Can I ask you a question, though? Because the numbers are so similar, we kind of went off in the wrong direction as well. But the prior figures is cost per acre that you have, and the new figure is cost per acre foot that you're using. So they're not, and then you had to work both those figures into the expenses, the monthly expenses, but it's comparing oranges with bananas.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, that's absolutely right. The previous fee of 68 was on a per acre basis, so that was how many acres of parcel you had. So we completely have changed from that approach and gone to a estimated per acre foot of pumping. Now, some parcels will drop out. In this scenario, the water district pumped 3,268 acre feet. So we will pay that fee times $3,268. So that, in lieu of putting on everybody's tax roll bill, $7 or $68 per acre, and you have many parcels that are less than a tenth of an acre. We're collecting it now through the water rates for the water district, but then the remaining parcels that are pumping will be assessed based on the estimated pumping. And so that's how we came up with the fee. And the 64 shown on this thing where it's cost per acre foot, that's for 1 year. And then for fiscal year 25, and then for fiscal year 26, it would have gone up to $101 per acre foot. So we average those two to sort of smooth that out. If you look at a budget, let me go back one slide here, because this is all based on the budgeted revenues. This is the revenue number here, and it's going up pretty modestly, I would say, although I can't really see it, but it's, I think it's 465 to 485 to 500. So maybe about $15,000 per year. So it is pretty modest in terms of its escalation, and the big change is because we changed from one method of applying the fee to a different method in fiscal year '25. So hopefully that's clear.
Shirley, you got a question?
Well, one observation I can make, the difference, of course, the water district has a much larger budget and responsibilities to pay the state and all those other kinds of costs. But but the water district is based basically on fixed charges. Whether especially as a resident, if you use a little water, a lot of water, it doesn't change your bill much because it's based on a predictable fixed charge equation, whereas the GSA has a much smaller budget so far, unless we get into some big projects. Then having it based totally on use really is well, I think it's mostly concerned with the weather, because I think most growers, have their best practices and they don't change crops every year, I guess. So, but that's going to be a challenge, I think. And maybe there will be some kind of an accounting buffer installed where you have a reserve account of some sort that draws on or gets put into something like that. So anyway, yep, thank you.
Bob, so is it possible to send a mailer to all the private pumpers that there is a $500 grant money available from the county? And is it possible for the district to develop something to encourage, because in June, obviously we're going to have our public hearing. If we can show the private pumpers that these are the two options available, if you start installing meters now instead of waiting for 2 years.
Yeah, we can certainly mail information out about the county's meter program. We don't have a program yet, so I think it would be premature for us to send anything out, but we can certainly work on that, and as soon as we get something that we can present and have you consider for approval, we can then send that out.
Can you do that in the next 30 days or not?
I doubt that we'll be able to get that out in the next 30 days. The public hearing is in, June 12th, so we got a little bit of time, so we'll work on it.
Right, I'm just saying is once the private pumpers realize that we're talking about 22, 23, and before we can make any changes, it's going to be 26 basically. So it is, because 24 and 25 are locked in unless you prove difference.
Right.
So then once people are motivated to say, hey, and I'm not questioning somebody that comes to you and say, hey, this is how many sprinkler heads I got, this is how many gallons a minute. That's nice, but in Oxnard there were several growers that were very creative in how they managed their water uses, and we don't want to go there. So.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, remember, this is sort of an evolving thing. We've gotten through several years now where we've raised revenues through one method, and we're evolving to a new method. It's not to say we won't continue to do that if we find that, yes, it makes much better sense and is manageable to put meters on everyone's well and read that on a monthly basis and direct bill. There are a number of things that we can do to try to tighten it up if that's really the desire of everybody. In the end, the budget is the budget. The needed revenue is the needed revenue, right? So we have to divide that burden up somehow, and so it's really about the percentage of water used. It's just like the water district. If we sell 2,000 acre feet less than we thought we were going to, that same burden has to be divided amongst all of the users of the system. So it's the same.
Right, no, I totally get it, but the problem is, will the private pumpers get it in the next 45 days? So it is,
So even though you don't have anything to report yet on the meters, we said from the last meeting, you're working on it.
Yes.
You took the action, and so there's not a big update tonight. We still might be able to have an update before June, maybe not in the next 30 days, but that doesn't mean that we can't put something in the mailer that talks about what the county has in offering meters while we are working out internally how we might tee that up as well.
Yeah, we can send the county's grant
Right.
out.
But you've been working on it, just don't have an update yet.
Yeah, in terms of less on the district offering a grant and more on what would it take to get meters and what are the steps we need to do?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Thank you.
right, and my point being is that if we can convince the private pumpers to install AMI meters that are compatible with the district's system, that would give everybody a lot of confidence that everybody being treated fairly. And that would make, because the pumpers I talked to, nobody's got a problem with going to the per acre pumping fee, because nobody wants to go in overdraft and, get salt water, but they want it to be done fairly, and I think that's what we need to work on, so. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We're down to item number,
May I just,
go ahead, Scott.
1 second comment?
Just want to say, I really appreciate this discussion, and we're definitely headed in the right direction. I think that Will's comments about the cost of doing business, I mean, we farmers, we try and do everything ourselves, so we keep our costs down as much as possible, and we really have a hard time putting our arms around the real world of what it costs to do business. To your comment about the budget being the budget, or the amount what being what it is, the big question that I think will need to be explained and answered as best you can at the meeting in June is, how much water the district is pumping, because you've got meters on your wells. The big question in my mind is how you arrived at your estimate for what the private pumpers are doing, and just has been said, how that's allocated. That's where we get into murky waters, so to speak. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, then we'll move on to item number 5C. Consider Proposition 218, notice of mailing on April 19, 2024, for the year 2025 and the year 2026. Bob?
Yeah, so as part of the process, GSA fees fall under Proposition 218, which requires you notice the impacted ratepayers that there's going to be a rate increase. And there's a protest vote, just like we do with the water district. And so to do that, we have to send out a notice 45 days prior to a public hearing. And so we plan to have a public hearing on June 12th. And that date was set so that we could get the fees to the county's assessor in time for them to make the October billing date. This is the notice. It's in your packet. It has this the fee that we talked about for both fiscal year 25 and 26, and we will be sending it out on April 19th, Friday, next Friday. So we've brought it to you for consideration if there are any changes or any feedback before we send it to the mailer.
I don't remember the exact problem with the last one we did that we had to remail, but is that
Yeah, it's
captured in here?
Yes, it's the statutory 180 days, I think. It's in the last sentence, right?
And then since this will only go out to 348 parcels, so we need 175 people, then it would be overturned?
Yes.
So as a water district customer, there'd be no ability to protest?
That's right.
If
We're
you're
not
if you don't have a well.
parcel owners,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. You want some action? We need a motion.
Polly makes a motion to approve the letter.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? And a roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Winkle?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Then we got item number 5D, consider appointing Lisa Silva, GSA Board Secretary for action. Bob?
Yeah, so for some time, I think most of you remember, maybe Casey, you don't remember, Ursula, who is board secretary, and both for the Water District and the GSA. And when Ursula left, we had the fortune of having Lisa come aboard, and she has been doing most of the work that the board secretary does. So this is just sort of an acknowledgement to move her officially into that position. So we'll do this both for the GSA and the Water District.
Polly makes a motion.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? And a roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Winkle?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And thank you, Lisa.
Congratulations.
Yes. Item number 6, Executive Director's Report, none. Then I hereby adjourn to the regular meeting of the Carpinteria Valley Water District. So we got new business, new business number 7A, consider changes to the rules and regulations regarding master meters for action. Bob?
Yes, this is back again. We withheld having a vote the last meeting. Director Balch was not with us, and we want to make sure we had a full board to make this decision. And so Mesa will just do a really quick kind of brief summary of where we were, and kind of at that point, if you have any questions, Mesa will be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we're just looking for a vote.
You can just go to the first slide. So none of the information I'm going to show or mention today is anything new. This is all just sort of a quick recap, since it's been a little while since we talked about this, to set the stage so you have all the information before the vote. So I have talked previously about how there are advantages and disadvantages to both individual meters and master meters with sub-meters. And so this is just a brief summary of some of the key points you can think about in terms of advantages for each. So along the top, these are some of the advantages of individually metering. So the state, as you know, is very focused on individualized water management, and so individual meters are obviously more in line with that than master meters with sub-meters. Additionally, the district can communicate leaks directly to customers and provide bill information directly to customers, rather than that going through a property manager or a third party or whoever is hired to manage bills if there are master meters. Additionally, when the district has individual meters, obviously it's responsible for maintaining those meters, versus sub-meters would be maintained through property manager or third party. And then, of course, the district structures its bills with tiered meters for residences, so there's a clear price signal there, whereas that could be obscured a little bit depending how a property manager communicates their bill amount to customers. If they don't provide every line, that might not be clear. Master meter advantages along the bottom would be that the state is obviously pushing housing, and there's a quick timeline there where they want housing implemented, so master meters could facilitate quicker housing development for the reasons sort of that are listed to the right, which is plumbing could be simpler if you have a master meter with sub-meters. If you have, a really dense, large development, it could be easier to just have a master meter in terms of plumbing. Similarly, at the curb line, it could be difficult to fit services for a bunch of individual meters. And then you could think about, too, potentially there's an argument that individual meters could drive up the cost of a development as well. So these are all just things to keep in mind when thinking about the advantages of the two different options. We want to just again mention that from what we see, most other agencies do allow master meters with sub-meters, so these are just a couple of examples. How the agencies implement the master meters and what they allow varies a little bit agency to agency, but the general concept is that they do allow master meters, whereas right now we don't. You can go to the next one, Bob. So the specific text is proposed in the rules and regulations. There's, I believe, red line text for you, but the general concept that we are proposing is to allow master meters on a building that has 10 units or more than 10 units, and that they're individually parceled and that there's space at the curb line. So, you know, if those conditions aren't all met, then of course there could be an argument for a master meter. And I know that this information was presented a couple of meetings ago incorrectly. I'd misstated it. And then I think at the last meeting, maybe, in a previous meeting, it was corrected, but I just want to bring it up again so that everyone has the correct information. So if we have a multifamily development, so individual meters to each dwelling unit, and we have a master meter development with the same number of dwelling units, but a master meter rather than individual meters, and you assume they're using the same amount of water total among, say, 10 units, their bills would be the same except for the basic charge. So the basic charge would be the only difference between the two for same consumption, same number of dwelling units. And the basic charge is slightly higher per master meter rather than individual meter. And then, yeah, so our recommendation has not changed. We are still recommending to allow master meters on those buildings with more than 10 dwelling units. And the text, again, is in the rules and regulations. That's all that I have.
So far. Ms. Shirley, any questions? Oh, sorry, Shirley, any questions?
No.
Casey?
So the only question, I guess, the language as I read it in like the red line, it essentially is just saying may allow. It's really not super clear. The district, buildings with 10 or fewer units are not eligible. However, final determination is eligible at the district's discretion, and each building with more than 10 residential units may be eligible for a master meter. So is every application is at the discretion of the district?
I think generally it's always at the discretion of the district engineer.
Yeah, it's replacing language that says master meters are not allowed. So what it's doing is giving staff discretion to allow in certain situations.
Okay, and then we'd see a decrease in the bill of about $75 on the example bill per month?
Per development, yeah.
Yeah, assuming same conditions, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Polly, anything? Matt?
Just one question on a slide. Can you go back to the, it was, next one back. No, it wasn't, yeah, that one, that was it. Individually parceled, it says there. Proposed master meter eligibility would be if they're not individually parceled, I think. Am I mistaking that? So a 10-unit condo building that's going to be sold to 10 different separate ownerships, that would be considered individually parceled. An apartment house is not individually parceled.
Yeah, you know, this might be leftover from, there used to be text in the rules and regulations that differentiated between condos and rental units, and we took that out. So you're right, this might be old.
So just for clarity for everybody watching, that should say not individually parceled, am I correct?
Yeah, so it's, if you have a building, so one building, really, at this point, we're not saying, I believe, in the text of the rules, whether it's individually parceled or not. So both condos and rental units would be eligible. So that's just
Okay.
outdated. It's not a
So
criteria.
it could be individually parceled or not. I'm just
Well,
trying
I-
to correct the slide so I understand.
I think the guidance that we would give is not individually parceled, because condos are individually parceled, and we were pretty clear earlier that if a development came to us as individual condos, we wouldn't put a master meter in. We would individually meter those.
So that should say not individually.
Yes.
parceled. Okay,
Yeah.
that's, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yep.
And if somebody came in and had a 11-unit building and said, no, I want individual meters, we'd be okay with that? So it's-
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So we're not saying it is completely mandatory. It is up to the builder's discretion.
Yeah, that's right.
And the water's discretion, provided it's got 11 units or more.
What we're anticipating will happen as these high-density development start to occur is each one of them will want to, if we have only individual meters and no master meter allowed, each one of them is going to want to come to the board, make their argument for why they are the exception to the rule. And so, rather than have that, we are approaching it from a policy standpoint where we've defined kind of, or bracketed, not defined, but bracketed kind of the cases in which they would be eligible for a master meter.
Okay, so I actually have a question. I talked to Bob about it a little bit before the meeting, is if you don't give your customers the tool to manage their water use, which on a master meter is going to be really hard for a family to know what they're using, not using. My question is to the rest of the board and to both of you, is can we require the developer, if they're so bent on putting in master meters, that they are required to put in an AMI system themselves, so their customers have full control over their water use? Is that something we can require, and is the board open to that possibility?
Is it already under state law?
Not AMI. They need to have a meter, but it's not an AMI meter.
Oh, I didn't understand. You said AMI meter.
Electronically read.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, real-time kind of meter that the developer puts in sub-meter and they pay for it.
The developer is then responsible for putting those AMI meters in, and he's also responsible for managing those meters.
Oh, I see.
So then the individual homeowners can manage their, or at least they know what they're doing.
Oh, I see. I didn't understand that. Yeah, that might be illegal.
Another thing that I had thought about, but maybe it's a committee discussion, I hate to say it, but what about a requirement that master meter managers, if you will, or owners, have to report to the district at some frequency, like annually, what the individual private meters read on a monthly basis or something? So it would just demonstrate that they are keeping a record. And that could just be, who knows how accurate we.
And
I don't wanna
all
accuse
these
people of
suggestions would be
unethical things,
towards the goal of water conservation control, being able to go with the droughts as they barrel in on us kind of tools that we can use. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Well,
Yes.
my intent would be that we would just know the managers are looking at the meters.
Yeah,
Because there'll be checks and balances.
yeah, it is, because we're getting, the district is getting its money from the main meter. We know how
Wouldn't
much
be a
water we're
revenue
using.
thing, it would just be
Yeah.
a compliance thing.
Right.
Yeah, we can develop a policy or practice associated with
Good idea.
master meters, and I'm not sure that would, the rules and regs are the places to put that sort of practice, and, but we can certainly develop something like that where we consider ways to make sure that compliance is happening with the state law.
So, yeah, that could be subsequent to this approval if we
Right.
move forward tonight.
Sure.
Right.
And it
Put a little
could be
bit more
discussed
teeth
at a
there
committee
that
level.
that
That
Case is
makes
looking
sense.
forward to. Right, take it back to the committee.
Right, but how about, so there's no support to include AMI meter systems in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
can do is, again, in this practice and or policy or practice that we would develop, we could consider conditioning projects that request a master meter to put in some sort of, remote read or electronic read equipment.
Plus, I like Matt's idea, at least once a year, I'd like to see the numbers. It keeps everybody honest.
Right, it puts some teeth behind it. But I think, so I completely agree with both of you. I just think it's something, it's kind of like phase two.
Yeah, and that idea would have to be vetted to see if
Right.
it's possible.
Right.
And I want to make sure if there's any developers that are going to put in central hot water heating system, that they also measure the hot water. If that, as we,
Yeah, as these projects move forward, those are the types of things that engineering review will look at and either ask questions on finding that out or make conditions for those types of things.
In case you wanted to know how much hot water was being produced?
well, one of the developers said that, and you were there, you were all here when he said that he was thinking of having a central hot water system, but that means you got to meter every individual
Hot and
home.
cold.
Yeah, hot water, to me, it made no sense at all. Honestly, to me, it's with solar hot water, it's kind of going backwards. But if a developer wants to put in a central hot water system, then he needs to put AMI meters on those hot water pipes.
Can you imagine when the hot water system doesn't work? Everybody's unhappy.
Well, I know that, that's why I wouldn't develop a system like that, but if somebody wants, honestly, I don't think they're gonna save a lot of money, because most homes are gonna be built going forward, that's the impression I'm getting, is they're gonna be fully electric with solar collectors, there will be no more gas, so.
And they're all instant.
Yeah, that's, well, with gas or electric gas. But it's my understanding from the developers I've been talking to is that they're all going all electric, and they're going to incorporate solar collectors to do that. But anyhow, I'm just saying, if we're going to do this, that's fine, but then I want, if there's a central hot water system, I think we should have AMI meters on those hot water pipes.
Can I address the AMI point? In the packet of information that I provided last time I presented, the thick packet with all of the research behind it, there was a little bit of information on AMI endpoints on meters there, and based on my research, it sounded like the options was only to have an endpoint on the master meter. There was not a viable option for endpoints on sub-meters that would provide the information to the tenants. Sounded like information could go to the management agency, but there was not a option I found for endpoints that would communicate directly to tenants, so.
So how are we going to teach people individual responsibility then? I mean, really, if we expect them to conserve water,
I think there are solutions out there, not at the scale that the water district uses AMI. I think they're probably called, there are solutions for individual meters that someone wants to know how much water they're using. This reader, would send that information to the smartphone app or something like that. So they are out there. Yeah, they are out there.
no, that's fine, as long as we
No, it's on the radar to take that to the next step.
That's
to
fine.
To your
Yeah.
point.
no problem.
And then Meso's already done a lot of research too, so.
Yeah, so I guess my concern, and I'll just briefly state it, is that I think we're opening ourselves up to more complications. I mean, we already have talked about this ad nauseum now for months, just going through the potential what-ifs, and I think that opening us up to may approve, essentially a master meter for any kind of building. We can do it for more than 10, or maybe less than 10 if you pitch your case, or if you get, the last engineer didn't like it, but the new engineers like it, whatever it is. I think it's just complicating a process that we have been fortunate to not have to deal with for years, and I'm not sure why the recommendation is to approve it from staff. I don't see it simplifying workloads. I don't see it increasing revenue. I don't see it doing really anything advantageous from the district perspective.
Yeah, I think what it does is it does simplify the administrative burden, because we will have a number of these applications coming in, and, currently, we get a development come in, they submit plans, we review the plans, we sit down, let them know, okay, you need to extend a main or put in a fire hydrant or whatever it is that they need to do, need to get this many meters, and we do an estimate of how much all that's going to cost. Added to that now with these high-density buildings is going to be the question, can we get master meters? Because the burden of the plumbing that you're asking us to undertake for these high-density buildings is problems, a problem for them.
Sure. But isn't your response now, no? I mean, isn't that the response? We don't
Right.
allow it?
But anyone can appeal a staff decision to the board, and I pretty much guarantee you that's what's going to happen each time with each of these developers. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. We're just trying to come up with a basis to evaluate in the rules and some discretion at staff level. We would use the basis of 10 or more than 10 units per building as a basis for exercising that discretion.
Right. But wouldn't they just appeal it then? If you're saying they're going to appeal it, if you say no, wouldn't they appeal it at 9?
Possibly, but I mean, in most cases, if it makes sense, we're not going to say, no, you can't have a master meter. We're going to say, okay, that makes sense. You have more than 10 units in your building, space is constrained. Okay, this makes sense to have a master meter. It really fits in with the regulations, and so in that case, we wouldn't have to go to the board. Normally, we would say no always because the policy requires that of us.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I make one comment too? Do I understand correctly, though, what year did we disallow master meters? Because I think that was kind of recent. In our history, didn't it was at the discretion of the district, and so we have quite a few master meter accounts.
Yeah, there were no policies until that time. I think it was probably 2005. I'm just
So we're
reaching.
kind of a little bit going back to that. It seems like common sense to me, but, okay, thank you.
I'd just like to make one point, and again, it sounds like we're all moving in the right direction, but people self-help, when they built the project of Via Real, they put in individual meters for all the different apartments, and they did not put in gas meters because they're all electric with solar backup. So, and again, we're ready to move forward here. I'm just not buying that these developers are not able to do this. It's more a mindset, but yeah, it's going to cost more, but the district is way better qualified to maintain these meters than a developer is.
Yeah, and that's, in that situation, those units were what I would call linear. They side-by-side units. There were maybe 2 units stacked on one on top of the other, but they were side-by-side. So those lent themselves to individual meters, whereas some of these developments that we're seeing proposed now are multi-story buildings with, small footprints. And in those situations, I would expect that it would be difficult to put individual meters in.
All right, we need a motion.
Probably makes a motion to support the master meter policy, knowing that it is a good first stab. Thank you, Mesa, for all your hard work.
I second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Then roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Nay.
Director Van Weerden?
No, I'm going to abstain, so.
Motion carries 3-2.
You voted no? Or
Me?
aye?
I voted no. 3-1-1, I think, right?
3-1-1.
Well, abstain is a no, so it's
Okay.
3-2.
So you're good, so. And then I think Mesa wanted to do another presentation from item 8B. So we need a
Yeah,
motion for that?
thanks.
or-
Yeah, we would need to take it out of order, so we would need approval of the board.
Okay, I need a motion to move item 8B to be presented now.
So moved.
Polly seconds.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Weerden?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Go ahead.
This will be brief. I wanted to provide a report on the CCWA's operating committee meeting that I attended. I think the main topic to talk about there is the proposed transfer rules. So CCWA has written a document basically that says what the rules are for its member agencies to transfer or exchange water to third parties outside of its service areas, outside of the county. And during the committee meeting, we basically just talked about some feedback we had on the rules and some places where we wanted clarification. The main points of discussion were that the timeline is essentially all around, the context of the rules is really all around the right of first refusal. So if you want to transfer or exchange water to a third party, you have to give a right of first refusal to the other agencies within the county to instead get that water under the same terms. So the idea is that the other agencies would have to notify the seller within 10 days that they were interested in the water, and then provide a commitment within 45 days. So we just asked a couple questions about that timeline, and the intent there is basically to give sufficient time to go to our boards. So if another agency wanted to sell water outside of the district or outside of the county, we would have 45 days to come to you and get approval if we wanted to buy that water instead under the same terms. There was also a little bit of confusion over the availability of Article 56 water, which is carryover water on the state water project. The accounting on that, because we can only use half of it, is a little bit odd, and the way it was written up was a little bit confusing, so we just asked for some clarification around that. And then the other main point of discussion was on the right of first refusal is triggered by a agency coming and saying, we have this deal that we're planning on doing to sell water. So if the terms of that sale change significantly, that would re-trigger the right of first refusal, but it's not clear what substantial change would be there. There's not a clear mechanism that defines what a minor versus a major change into the rules or the sale agreement would be. So we asked for some additional clarification around that, and it sounded like CCA wanted to leave that more to the agency's discretion, so I'm not sure how they've amended it, but since we talked, they brought it to the CCWA board meeting, and I believe got feedback there as well, and so it's still draft at this point, but they have proposed rules.
Any questions? Thank you. Then we move on to item number 7B, consider CAP project update for information, Bob. And Rob will be here. Oh, Rob is here.
Yeah, thanks. So we've talked a little bit about the CAP project. We've had some cost information that we received from the design engineers, as well as I think I reported to you, we had some change in grant funding that we're dealing with. And so we've been working on coming up with a summary report of all of that and a plan on how to move forward. And so this will be the first step. This presentation kind of will give you the background of the engineering and some of the things that we've looked at. And then on the 24th, we'll return with some work that Reftalis is working on as far as rate impacts and that sort of thing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rob. He's got a lengthy presentation for you.
Hopefully not too lengthy. Rob Morrow with WSC. I was here almost a year to the day ago. Didn't change the year on this title slide. I apologize.
No.
So that's my fault. So we're coming here today, as Bob mentioned. We've gotten recent cost information, grant information, and trying to provide as much information to you, the board, to help make decisions on moving forward. WSC is here to represent you, the district, to try to deliver this project in as cost-effective manner as possible and respond to your concerns, specifically, as we've heard, about cost certainty and understanding where costs are going. And so we're coming today trying to provide information to help you understand where we came from and where we are today and where things are going. So please ask questions as we're going through this. Chris Maljan from WSC is also here. He's leading the design oversight He just wrapped up the last 4 years he spent at Camarillo. They just built a 4 MGD desalter, so generally similar technology to what we're talking about here in Carpinteria, and went through the whole design, construction process and through startup. So I'm going to give just a little bit of background information. Chris is going to dive into a little more details on some of the cost factors, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the next steps Bob mentioned. Okay, yeah, we do have Andy Salison from Corollo, who's one of is the lead designer for the advanced treatment plant component of the project, and is also available to answer questions if needed. Next slide. So I won't belabor this, but why are we even here talking about CAP? We've had 2 wet years, and the intent of CAP is to help address the downward pressure on all of the district's existing supplies, groundwater, surface water, state water project, Kachuma project, combination of climate change and regulations. So SGMA in the groundwater world, environmental regulations with Kachuma releases and other impacts, same with the state water project. So we've got a downward pressure on average yields as well as large swings in yields. So I think we've just experienced that with the extended dry period followed by 2 wet years. But we should note that the groundwater basin, even after these 2 wet years, it still has substantial way to go to recover. And so one of the benefits of CAP is providing that stable supply to the groundwater basin to help prepare for droughts as well as survive during them. But of course, fiscal responsibility is also a key part of the board, and we're interested in supporting that and providing the information we can to help you with that. Next slide, please. So where have we come over the past year? So I was here a year ago talking about cost updates. The message was a little better then because we had just been notified of several grant awards, and so those cost rises were offset by those. Also to initiate final design, so a contract with Woodard & Kern was approved approximately a year ago, and they're the Woodard & Kern and Corollo just submitted the 50% design first week of January of this year. So since then, they have completed a basis of design update, which looked at some of the changes that have happened since the project was last defined in 2019, the preliminary design report. Looked at the latest flows, looked at some design assumptions, and then have spent the bulk of the past year on the 50% design. During that time, we also did a pilot study at Carpinteria Sanitation District's plant, looking at the water quality specifically that we'd see as part of this project, and have incorporated that into some of the design assumptions, and Chris will talk about that a little more. And what we've been spending the last few months doing is value engineering, which is looking at the cost estimate that came in from the design engineer, and looking at ways to reduce costs while balancing that by avoiding increases to O&M and shifting it to O&M, but while providing a reliable project that meets the district's goals. Coming out of this, the next phase of design gets started. Ultimately, we're looking at getting bids in March of next year, so a little less than a year from now, assuming we restart in about a month or so. And so at that point is when we would be coming back to you with the big decision of whether to approve those construction contracts and the associated financial impacts and move forward with the project. I think now we're going to dive a little bit into the cost changes, and so I'm going to hand it to Chris for the next set of information.
Thanks, Rob. Can everybody, is this good? Hear me? Great, thank you. Yeah, so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our drivers for the costs that we've seen increase. since the 50% design submittal was presented to us in January. Talk about what we have done since receiving that design submittal to help mitigate the impacts for increased costs, and then we'll hand it back to Rob. So really want to dive into the three main drivers for why we've seen costs increase and provide at least some explanation for why we may have seen that. It kind of includes three primary categories, inflation being, a predominant category, some scope changes, which we'll get into, and then the unfortunate reduction in grants that we received notice of earlier this year. Before we continue, though, I want to make sure that we have some, firm understanding about kind of the basis of our costs that we've had to date. We originally received a facilities plan or developed a facilities plan in 2016 based on the Association for Advancement of Cost Engineering. That level of design for a project typically has an accuracy of about minus 30% up to plus 100%. As we progress design, the accuracy of those cost estimates become more certain because there's more certainty in what is going into that design. So from 2016 to 2019, we have a preliminary design report that was developed. Again, accuracy up to a positive 50%, or effectively, of the cost of the construction for the project. That was developed in 2019, but really the preliminary design report that was developed doesn't contain a lot of granular details for design. It's really the basis for design. It informs the design to progress to a higher level. So it's so really with that, they're still limited in number of details. The cost estimate that's prepared during that level of design typically will just include vendor quotes, estimates based on historical projects, and with really limited information in terms of details for what goes into that project. And then we kind of are under the unfortunate circumstance that the next design iteration that we received was 5 years later in 2024. And so the cost, the rate base that was done last year was really based on the 2019 preliminary design and escalated. So let's go to the next slide.
Can I
Yeah,
make
certainly.
a comment about that prior slide? In 2016, I don't recall anybody ever quoting, with a $30 million, water recycling project for 1,000 acre feet a year, that it could be 30 million up to $60 million. So does that figure change as you go along through the years? I wish they'd have had couched it in those terms before.
Yeah, so the uncertainty is one piece of it, and the 2016 facility plan, the estimate for the project was 20 million, so according to
It was
these,
30, I already upped it.
yeah, according to these rules, that means it could be between 20 and 40 million. But there was also inflation that occurred during that time, and then as well, scope changes, so.
Yeah, well,
What was the 2019 estimate? Do you know?
I think it was all in 2019 dollars. I think it was low 30s. Sounds right.
We'll get into, those numbers are in this slide deck, I
Yeah.
believe.
okay.
Right. So, a big driver, as noted, is inflation. Presented on this slide here are two cost indices. I guess, Bob, can you hit the next? Oops. Seem to have lost the. Okay. The blue line is the ENR CCI Construction Cost Index. This is the typical index that engineers will use to help escalate costs. It includes a combination of factors for labor costs and materials for concrete, wood, and steel. And then in the yellow line is the historical average, which has been about 3% per year. And what is, of course, unique about our timing here is post-COVID, the inflation that we've seen is significantly higher than what the historical average is. So we've seen a 30% rise since 2019 in the ENR CCI index, as opposed to what we would typically expect as about 12%. But that's not the whole picture. So Bob, you can go to the next slide. The ENR index is construction-wide. But perhaps what makes our project a little bit more unique here is that the wastewater and industry and the utility industry in general have experienced higher inflation values than the overall construction indices or industry. And so the two indices that we've added to the slide are the materials price index and the Handy Whitman index. We're showcasing the materials price index that has seen a precipitous rise. I mean, there's over a 90% increase since 2019, predominantly because a facility like the advanced water treatment facility that we're proposing here is relatively material heavy. There's a lot of expensive materials that go into this type of project, and so it's going to be swayed by a higher material cost than maybe your typical construction project. And so that is accounted for in this Handy Whitman index. This is an index that does, again, kind of particular or specifically pertain to the water and wastewater industry. And so we've seen, as opposed to the CCI index, over that same period of time, has risen over 50% since 2019. And this is in line with other potable reuse projects. Unfortunately, Carpinteria is not unique in this. I'll just cite some statistics here that's not shown here. Soquel Creek, from the guaranteed maximum price that they received for their IPR project, has risen over 30%. Padre Dam, similarly, from a pre-design to a GMP, 60% increase. Ventura, from pre-design to a quasi-GMP, because they've structured their project a little bit differently than we have, I've seen a 50% rise increase, and this is really from pre-COVID to now current costs. Las Virgenes is 125% from pre-design to current costs, and Central Coast Blue from an escalated pre-design to now 60% cost increase.
And what's ours?
We're getting to it.
Okay.
And so that was, inflation, our changes from our pre-design reports. This is another component to our cost increase. We're going to cover two categories quickly, capital and O&M. For capital costs, we have seen some scope changes from the 2019 report. The kind of major categories I've highlighted here, the AWPF building itself has increased in size. It's due to some assumptions that were made as a part of the 2019 report, including the need for support areas. The 2019 report assumed that support areas like bathroom facilities, break room would be accommodated within the existing sanitary district's facility. Unfortunately, though, we've learned that facility is at their capacity for manpower. And so by adding the staff that's necessary to run this plant, we need to add support facility staff to our building. Furthermore, we've added some additional footprint for the process area. 2019 report may have been a little bit tighter than the operations would desire, so we've expanded the plant a little bit to accommodate operations. We have pulled back on that, which we'll talk about a little bit in the value engineering portion of this. But from the PDR to the 50% design that we received in January, that was a reason for a cost increase. Another reason that we have for a cost increase is our below-grade equalization tank. Equalization tank is critical for a facility like this because of the diurnal pattern for flows leaving the sanitary district's plants. RO facilities like a constant flow for their membrane process. And so we need to equalize that flow across a 24-hour period to ensure that those membranes operate smoothly. The PDR didn't specify whether or not to proceed with a below-grade or above-grade tank. The decision was made to proceed with the below-grade tank, which does carry some additional capital costs, but lowers O&M because we don't have to pump up to that tank. So at the time anyway, because that could be covered largely, or we have a greater ability to cover that by grants, we were moving forward with the below-grade tank. And then finally, we did upsize the capacity of the facility slightly. I think the PDR assumed a 1.2 MGD facility, and this is a maximum. This is a capacity of the treatment system, not necessarily how much water would be produced by the facility. So we've gone from 1.2 to a 1.5 MGD facility. The reason for that, there's a couple of them. One being that during the winter months, when we see higher flows, we do get to capture a little bit more of that flow and produce treated water. The second is there are some operational benefits to having a higher capacity. A lower capacity would mean that the CSD's facility is spilling a little bit more, meaning that we're not able to capture all of it. And the way that the plant is currently configured, it would mean more water would go through the chlorine contact basin on a greater frequency. And there is benefit to reducing that frequency from an operational standpoint. So for that reason, having a larger capacity does benefit operations. Then we get to O&M costs. As Bob mentions, we did move forward this summer with an RO pilot study and also did some water quality testing. Out of that, we got a better definition of the water quality that we should expect going into the AWPF, and that has allowed our design engineer to refine their chemical dosing and the chemical dosing strategy in general. And the assumptions that were made in the PDR are such that we're expecting to need to dose a higher frequency of chemicals both upstream of the RO and downstream, that therefore resulting in higher operational costs for chemicals. And then just in general, the inflationary costs for chemicals is higher. I briefly touched upon this, but where the project is we'll need more staffing than we had assumed in the 2019 report. 2019 report assumed 2 additional staff for AWPF, and at this time, we're looking like we're going to need about 4 additional staff, CSD staff, to operate the facility. And then finally, monitoring requirements. Certainly over the last 4 years, a number of IPR projects have been permitted. Monterey, One Water, and then Soquel Creek has received their permits. And so we have greater understanding about our monitoring requirements for this facility. And so we've been able to kind of capture those costs with this revised estimate for us. So this first slide here, getting into our capital cost estimates. The first column is our rate basis that was approved last year. Again, this is based on our 2019 rates or PDR that we've escalated with our CCI index at the time. And I'll just kind of remind, I guess, the board, the reason why we had to move forward with our rate case at that time, even though our project definition may not have been where we would have liked it, was due to ensuring that we had adequate coverage for our MADS testing for our SRF grant agreement. So it was imperative that we got that done at the time, even though it may not have been, ideal, because our project definition was based on something that was 4 years prior. And so our current project cost estimate right now is $70.9 million. That includes the entire program costs for both construction and our soft costs for design, construction management, testing, and I think, let's see, in terms of the increase itself, I can certainly ask or answer any questions you guys have. In terms of some of the major differences, Some I've already described regarding the advanced treatment from 24 to 36. For the pipeline, from 2.5 to 6, again, inflation being one of them. What I didn't discuss previously in terms of scope changes, because this wasn't a program scope changes, this was a scope change from one package to another. As a part of the injection wells, we need to backwash those periodically, just reverse the flow, approximately at this time estimated to be once a week. That generates a high volume of water quickly, and we need to store that backwash water for a period of time before we can allow it to enter back into the sanitary district's system. The previous design assumed an above-ground steel tank at the LDS church site. That, of course, has since gone away. We don't want an above-ground tank at the Lindenwell site, so we've transitioned into a buried pipeline that will store and meter that water slowly into the sanitary district's collection system. So that was really a shift in scope from, I think, the injection and monitoring well bucket into the pipeline bucket of costs. And then from construction management engineering from 5.3 to 7.3, a couple of reasons for that, but again, largely due to compliance, greater understanding for compliance needs, and then also for some startup requirements have been added to that. All right, Bob, now the fun parts. Let's look at those in reverse. So what have we been doing for the last couple of months now? With the understanding of our revised costs, we've really tried to focus on how do we, reduce that. Let's see. We've been proceeding with the value engineering effort, and this has been a joint effort between our firm WSC and the design engineers firm Woodard & Kerr and Carollo, trying to come up with ideas and ways to reduce our overall capital costs and O&M costs for the projects. So we're in the middle of that right now, so these numbers are not final, but they're in the right direction, and we are refining and getting closer. Originally, as a joint group, we identified nearly 50 concepts and ideas to reduce capital O&M or improve project efficiency. And through the efforts of the team, those have been whittled down to about 12 key ideas that help reduce overall capital and O&M costs that warranted investigation, which we're currently doing. Ultimately, the value engineering has resulted in about $3.5 million in capital savings as a full project concept of 1,000 acre feet per year. So that's the second column that you see there in the middle. This includes reducing the size of the building. So I talked about before that we've increased it as a part of 3% design. Well, we're going to shrink that a little bit. This does affect some operational considerations, but the feeling is that that's a worthy reduction in operations to reduce the size of the building. We've shifted some of the processes from inside the building to outside, again, to reduce the size of the AWPF building. We've also changed the way that we intend to improve the soil and ground surface to place and locate our structures on sites. Previous design included, it's called deep soil mixing. It's a very intensive process. Design engineer thinks we can achieve a similar level of ground improvements with a helical anchor system. We've also moved to shallower buried tanks, which will minimize dewatering needs. And finally, we've reduced our conveyance pipeline from 12-inch down to 10-inch. This requires us to increase pressure to get to the wells, which will increase O&M costs a little bit, but the benefit of the capital cost reduction makes that effort worth the work. And our last column there, it kind of represents an ability for us to reduce capital costs even further. And this is really a phased approach. The way that the AWPF is designed currently, we have between 2, and there's some direction towards having a 3-skid system for, and this is, I'm referring to the RO skid. We also, in our microfiltration or ultrafiltration system ahead of the RO, currently planned for 2 skids. And in this case, what we're doing is we're reducing all of our processes by effectively 1 skid. So rather than install 2 RO trains, we're installing 1 RO train, or maybe 2 RO trains, depending if we go to a 3 RO skid system. And our output then is reduced. We're not reducing by half. Instead of 1,000 acre-feet per year, we're generating between 650 and 700 acre-feet per year. But it's a way to reduce our capital costs. The other primary benefit, and really what you see here, is a reduction in our injection and monitoring wells. So by virtue of reducing our capacity in half, we also reduce the need to install 1 injection well and 2 monitoring wells. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rob. Talk about the rest.
All right. So this slide really got shrunk from when we sent it over. So I apologize because it's a little hard to read. But, again, when I was here a year ago, we were talking about how over 50% of the capital costs would be funded by grants. And in February, we were notified that due to state budget cuts, the state board was rescinding our grant, as well as 5 to 7 other projects in our similar position, from $15 million to $5 million. That was approved by the state board on March 19th. Obviously, no one was happy about that. We were not happy about that. We expressed the impact it's going to have, especially on projects for agencies of this size with relatively small communities. Places like LA and San Francisco, which also lost the grant, have a much bigger tax and rate base to spread that loss around. It has a substantial impact to you. So we've conveyed that. The budget cuts are deep, and the state board felt this was one way of spreading the pain across all the different projects. The one small win we got was the addition to the resolution that was passed that reduced this, was that if there is grant funding available in this program next year, that the projects that got funding cut would be first in line to be refunded, or to get funding. Now, that's going to be fully dependent on tax revenues and things like that, and so there's probably, we shouldn't hold out too much hope for that to happen, but there is some hope. On the positive side, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Title 16, that's a federal program. We were previously awarded a little under $10 million. We applied again in December to request more funds based on the increased costs. We requested over $9 million, basically took the cost estimate we got from the design engineer and added even more to that, mainly so we don't have to go back again and ask for money. What we're eligible for Title 16 is roughly 25% of capital costs. So cost increases are generally offset by 25%. The announcement's going to be made in April, by the end of this month, as far as awards. We feel fairly good about it because this is still several $100 million for the Western U.S. coming from previous BIL. And so feel fairly good about the award, but we won't know till the end of the month. We have, the district was awarded as part of through the county and from the state IRWM award, and is eligible to get $650,000 for planning costs. And the district has submitted requests for that through the county. But obviously our focus, so I guess I should say, federal dollars we've maxed out on. The Bureau, part of that grant is we can't go after other federal funds. So even if there are other programs we could pursue, it would reduce the amount we get from our Title 16 grant. So our focus is on state funds. Unfortunately, right now, there just isn't anything. We're looking at climate change programs, groundwater programs, groundwater contamination programs, and the last bond, Prop 1, and even that Prop 68, all those funds are being expended now. So we've gone from having roughly a 50% grant funding to, with the currently awarded funds, a little over 20%. We're hopeful, again, with the Title 16 announcement coming later this month, that we can get cover part of that increase, and so that gets us to a little over 30% grant funding. Any questions on this slide? Okay.
Yeah, is that 30% grant funding on the
On
the
the
79,
70.9 million.
70.9
And,
million?
and that's what, we have a little tilde with the USBR number, because depending on the cost estimate, we cite that number would adjust because we're assuming 25% of that number.
So I have the same question. So the 33 is on the 70 on the higher number.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so if we had the lower number, that number would come down slightly. But yeah, that's correct. So if we applied the value engineering number where we save 3.5 million, our grant would go down by 25% of 3.5 million. Does that make sense? Okay, I see.
I did, so I just wanted to follow up, I guess, on my question earlier. I heard all the other sites that have gone through and what their increases were. I still didn't hear what ours is. From preliminary to now, our increase that was estimated to be 100% is actually more like 300%? Am I right?
Well, 30% to, or 30 million to 70 million is a little over 100%.
Oh, it's starting at 30, okay,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
20.
and the numbers, most of the numbers that Chris quoted, those were all estimates from the last few years of just during COVID, basically. And not looking, because I think if you look at those even previously, those numbers are much bigger, similar
But
to,
early on, it was to Casey's point, early
I,
on, it was lower than 30.
Yeah, so the last decision that you made was to approve rates to support 49 million in capital costs. And it's gone up to 70 million, so it's about 20 million over 50 million. So or what is that? 40%, yeah. So pretty in line with the other projects, I would say.
but I think what you're saying is, if we go back to 2016, I don't have those exact
That's what I meant.
numbers in front of me. I can tell you by.
It was around
'cause,
25.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
When we first started.
most of those projects have seen the same escalation. So it doesn't make the message any better.
Yeah.
But it's also not unique to our project.
And so how confident are you that the 20% accuracy applies to the 50% design?
I will talk about that.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. So the capital cost translates to debt. And I want to connect what we talked about a year ago, and the debt we talked about a year ago, to what we're talking about today. So, again, with the 70.9 number, just to keep this consistent, we would be looking at an SRF loan going from 22 million, which we're talking about a year ago, to 47.5 million, when you net out the grants. And so that's again a combination of, and you can click it one more time. It's a combination of losing the $10 million grant, inflation, and changes in scope. And I think the key, again, this is just the reasoning, but the inflation we underestimated a year ago. We took it from 2019 to 2023, and using ENR CCI, and we just were not fully capturing the actual inflation specific to these projects that now that bids are coming in for some of these, we're seeing. And then also projecting forward with inflation has been obviously higher. But there's also changes in scope. And so what's the intent of the initial contingencies in projects is as the project definition decreases, the contingency costs in those decreases. And the intent is to capture those scope changes. But what this is showing is the scope has changed beyond those initial assumptions. And so, yeah. Were you going to say something? Okay. So right now, again, looking at the $7.9 million, we're looking at a $47.5 million SRF loan. So then translating, we're not going into rates today, but what we're doing is developing the numbers to provide to Raftellus to run some rate scenarios. So if you go to the next slide.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yep.
Is that 47.5 inclusive of the anticipated 7 some odd million?
Yes.
Like being received?
Yes.
So including that, it's 47. Excluding that, it'd be another
54.
8 or something?
Yeah, yeah. That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Next slide, please. So this is starting to get at the numbers that go into the rate analysis. And so on the very left is what was used for the rate analysis last year. Debt service on the bottom, O&M above that, translating to about $3 million a year. If you take that and go with the 50% design number from a capital and O&M perspective, so the debt service has gone up. The only good thing that has happened with SRF is our rate's gone from 2.6% to 1.7 is where we're currently at. So we've got a relatively low rate for the loan right now. But obviously total debt service has increased. And then O&M has also increased, and that 0.5 bar gets at, Chris mentioned it, but the chemical costs have been very erratic and have been substantially increased along with, in line with the materials price index. And so right now we're trying to guess where it's going to go, and obviously it's very hard to do that. And so we're showing a range here because we're not sure of where it's going to end up. And so that part of the analysis is going to be looking at a range of potential O&M in the rate analysis. So then the second two columns just translate what Chris just described as far as the value engineering. There's a little bit of savings in capital. It translates to $100,000 per year in debt service savings. There isn't any change in O&M. And then on the very last one, doing a phase one concept of about 650 acre feet per year, down from 1,000. You reduce capital and reduce some O&M. You reduce chemicals and energy, but we have the same labor, we've got the same monitoring requirements, and so you don't get a fully scaled savings on the O&M. Casey, I want to make sure I'm gonna, yeah, okay. I know it's gonna talk about your question. So let's go to the next slide. No other questions? Okay. So cost control, cost certainty. So our focus right now is minimizing the cost of this project for the district and cost certainty. So the question, how do we know we come back a year from now, it's not going to be 20% higher? So I'm going to talk a little bit to that right now. So we're currently following a design bid build process. We have taken the 50% design, look at value engineering. We've identified places to control, to reduce investment. There's also some things that the district could do, like pre-purchasing equipment. It removes some of the markups from the contractor. It adds some risk when you transfer it to the contractor. So there's some pros and cons to those approaches. And then obviously the initial deferring a second phase right now is a way to save capital. So we're at the 50% design. What's the big change from the preliminary design to now is that much of the design cost estimate are takeoffs from the design. So you can measure the length of pipe, the piping within the building, the square footage, lots of different takeoffs that you can measure and put those to line items. Whereas before we had a unit cost per square foot of building or a unit cost per linear foot of pipe. There's still not a detailed level of definition around the electrical and controls, which is one item that has seen a lot of increase recently and is actually, when we talk about pre-purchasing, is one of the items we're targeting because it's got an 18-month lead time right now, which is our whole construction schedule going into this. So that's one of the things we're focusing on. And the assumptions have tried to reflect the changing, or do reflect the change in costs, but there's definitely some uncertainty there. So to get to more cost certainty, you get contractor commitments. So design bid build process will put out bids. You accept the low bid, and that's your number. There's potential for change orders and some uncertainties there. Alternative delivery is a process where you start to the design and then bring in a contractor at some point. There's different methods. You can bring them in and get what they call a guaranteed maximum price at a 30%, a 50%, 75%, depending on the process. And so that is pursued by some agencies to get that price earlier in the process. Generally, you're not getting a lower price because you're transferring risk from you as the owner to the contractor. So they're going to price in the risk of what's going to happen during the design process, during construction, which is now farther out. Also, you still retain the risk of site conditions, which you do with the design bid build process. And I think importantly, you still retain the risk of material price increases. That's part of a standard guaranteed maximum price that if materials go up, you're paying for it. And in the first example that Chris gave of Soquel Creek, which is up near Monterey, the bid started before COVID, and 18 months later, most of that 30% increase was material costs. So we've done it. We have experience with the different alternative delivery projects. We've analyzed it. Where we are right now with the 50% design, we can get to a bid in March of 2025 faster than we can with alternative delivery because of where we are right now, where the designer can continue with the design. Alternative delivery, we'd have to redo a lot of work. There's a lot of legal involved, and there's just a process of selection. And so the earliest we're looking at is maybe of summer of next year, and then you're also delaying the start of construction. So you've got some inflation risk in there. The main benefit of an alternative delivery approach is there is likely less cost to get to that number. So design fee, there's $2 to $2.5 million remaining in design fee to get from 50% to 100%. An alternative delivery, you could probably get to a guaranteed maximum price for half that. give or take, depending on the process selected, the legal process and the approvals it's going to take to get there. But again, ultimately, you're going to be paying more, and you're likely going to have, and you're going to continue to have some risk there. So our initial analysis is that if for proceeding with the project, the best approach is to continue with design, to get to a low bid through the design bid build process based on 100% design. And at that point, the board can make the decision whether to move forward with the project. Chris, do you want to add anything for some of the risks over the next year? Or from a cost perspective? Yes.
Can I ask you one
Yeah.
question also? Especially all the building materials going through the roof and all those figures. I'm really concerned about what is the time period they're looking at? Because pre-COVID, post-COVID, we all know there was all kinds of monkey business going around in the ports. Especially contractors and people that need material, the shippers all joined together in a few cartel, and they were holding things up at the port. And so I was really under the impression that we sure did have a spike then. And finally, the feds had to step in. And so I hope that's been smoothed out. And I'm just wondering what kind of inflation, especially building inflation, numbers you're going on, because I have heard, for steel pipe or things like that, but it was a temporary spike, and also the inflation rate is going down. It doesn't mean its price is less than it was 5 years ago, but it's not increasing at the same rate. So do you have any idea on what time frame they're basing these especially building cost prices on?
I mean, the numbers that are there reflect the most up-to-date numbers that are happening. So those are they're updated monthly based on recent costs from the last month. They
Really?
are
Oh.
very timely, and so I agree. Rationally, this should be leveling off.
Especially chemicals, too.
Yeah,
They went crazy.
Yes.
But now they're leveling off.
Yeah, so but we were thinking, I mean, the materials have been continuing to go up, which is concerning. Just one anecdote, because we've been talking to a lot of contractors about what they're seeing. So contractors, or general contractor bids the project, they bring on subcontractors to do specific work. When bids come in, subcontractors give them a number, and that's what they're going to do their work for the project. They're saying many subcontractors are not committing to the prices they give them on bid days, because by the time their work starts 6 months from now, they can't commit to that being their cost. And so there's a lot of when that stops, it's not typical. I don't think we know that. But it's what's happening right now, and yeah.
Yeah, and I'll
Chris has the answer.
Before we leave that point, I'll just say that it does make an argument for doing the project in phases, because we can kind of remove some of that instability out of our project. We would do a smaller project now, and then at the opportune time when things seem to be stable and grant money is available, we can finish the last phase of the project.
I don't agree with that, but thank you for making the point.
Sure.
At some point, it comes to, when is it ridiculous? $3,800 per acre foot, to recycle water and pump it into the ground. It's not even desal, at what point, as a board, do we say this doesn't make sense anymore? Or, because usually you would say cutting back, reducing the scope makes sense, but in this economy of scale, we're at the bottom right now, I think, looking into it in other projects in San Diego and Orange County, 1,000 acre feet a year is about the minimum. If you try to cut it below that, it starts to be silly. But it is, and some of the parts, I know it's very technical, and I really appreciate the CAP, committee and all you guys' efforts working on this, but we're reducing the scope, but but you have a 9% cost increase because of this, increasing the scope. So it's a little confusing, and adding 2 more staff, how that translates into so much more money. It's just, it's kind of concern, but I really appreciate your efforts to explain this, and I really did, was trying to crack open a door of hope about that maybe this crazy 100%, 600%, cost inflation is a glitch, and we might get, it might not be a permanent situation, but anyway.
Just so you know, what's in the cost estimate now is we're assuming 4.5% inflation, annual inflation right now. So above historic, but below the last several years.
And is that based on like an industry standard? Is that a throw at a dartboard? Is that like WSC's number? Who comes up with that?
So that's from the design engineers bid estimator who they have a construction background, so they have a contractor background. So basically, from their perspective, if they're a contractor bidding a job now, this is how they expect inflation to go. I mean, so they're doing their best estimate, but yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah. So going back to like your question of like a year from now, where are we going to be? That is a risk, right?
Any other questions? Actually, what was the term on the financing? How many years was the loan?
The SRF loan is 30 years.
30 years. And are we allowed to refinance those when interest rates come down, or is it?
They're not really going to get much below 1.7, and no, you
Oh,
can't,
that was pretty good, yes.
we can't refinance as part of the term of the agreement.
Right, and also getting a longer term, like 50-year loan, is that
Not available through the SRF program.
okay, all right.
So the 50%, after the value engineering, we dropped like 3.5 million. So I guess so I understand the concept, I guess I assume that value engineering would always be kind of the top priority and not burying every tank and, expanding as much as possible. Is that typical? Did we not convey, I guess, enough to that, let's keep it reasonable? I guess, we only trimmed off 3.5, which isn't doing much for us in the big picture, I guess, but I would have assumed that'd be kind of the top of the list beyond, if we get 1,000 acre feet, we want to do it as reasonably as possible, and to be able to chip off 3.5 million in a month seems like there was a lot of stuff in there that obviously we don't need, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's trade-offs. So, one example was just, the square footage of the building. If you've got plenty of room and it's cheap to build, as an operator, it's better to have more room, be able to bring equipment in and around. But talking to other sites, how tighter spaces have operated, that's where that's an example where we squeezed it down. We were able to make some of the tanks smaller, that then we're able to make them shallower. And so that was a trade-off on some operating parameters of how often we backwash, how the pumps would operate. And again, it just gets a little tighter And so, again, yeah, it's a trade-off.
Was that the big, like, what was the biggest driver in that 3.5, would you say? Was it, I mean, it wasn't the building footprint, I wouldn't imagine.
Building?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was fairly evenly distributed throughout.
Yeah.
Fortunately, don't have the numbers in front of us. I think it was fairly evenly distributed throughout. So there, between, the items that I cited, including, oh gosh,
Well, I mean, you couldn't, like, cut a skid out, right? But you could make the building a little smaller.
well, right, and that's the concept of the phased approach, is cutting that skid. Rather than make some concessions and trade-offs between operability and production, or operability and the design, cutting the production by removing the skid is just a full sale, reduction in that, right? It's not a trade-off per se. It's an acknowledgement of a reduced capacity. And then similarly or concurrently with the reduction and the treatment skids themselves, being able to eliminate an entire injection well just cuts that injection well cost in half. There isn't it's not, so that that's why we're kind of pursuing this phased concept, because again, the benefit there too is that we're not reducing our capacity in half. It's from 1,000 acre feet down to 650 to 700 acre feet per year. The reason why it isn't a half reduction with our 2 skids to produce 1,000 acre feet per year, really maximizing our production of water. So during the course of any one day, one of those skids will turn off. When we have one skid on, that skid is on 100% of the time. So that's because of that, because the skids turn off to maximize that 1,000 acre feet per year, or I should say that because that skid is on 100% of the time, notwithstanding clean in place processes or other downtimes, it is a full benefit of that skid. I'm not probably explaining myself very well, but all I'm trying to convey is it's because we're reducing our equipment and processes in half, we're not reducing our output by half.
So I guess I understand the phase 1 concept, but like to get to the 50% value engineering phase, like at the 67.4, I guess what were those reductions like? They were across kind of everything globally, you were saying? Like,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be real specific, but.
Right.
I'll
So,
interject because Andy Salveson's on the line, who's leading the design of the AWPF. Andy, are you able to chime in?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I've just been going on a nice long walk for the whole meeting here. I'm down in Ventura. I apologize for not being there in person. So just a couple things, and also Craig Erickson with Water and Currents also on the call. But the value engineering concepts were to refocus a couple key items. So just if you can big picture it, is the first one was the goal was maximize water recovery. So get as much water as you can out of the carp sand system and reuse it. And the other one was minimize operational impacts. And so, now with the lower costs, what we're seeing is a shift towards we're going to recapture vast majority of the water, but we're not going to maximize it. And at multiple points in the treatment process, we're making decisions that put a little extra burden on operations staff in different places. And so that's where those savings are coming from. There's also savings from, before you even get to the reducing the number of trains, before you even get to that, there's also the concepts of the building, where the initial concepts and buildings are expensive these days. Initial concepts were, cover everything, enclose it. And now we're looking at as much as possible using canopies, and where there's noisy equipment, and there is a lot of noisy equipment, that's all enclosed. So those are that's where some of the initial savings is coming from. And then the concepts of reducing the amount of initial equipment that gets installed. Now, you can put that equipment in later, but reducing that initial capacity of the system while still capturing the vast majority of the water. So I don't know if that helps, but I'm happy to answer it or help with the other questions.
Thanks.
I have another observation about the footprint issue, it seems like our recycling project is in a pretty nice place because we have what, $1 a year rent, almost free land from the sanitary district. They have a larger piece of land because when they first built it, they were going to do recycling with Montecito, who backed out, and so they have extra room there. So, and the buildings are basically brick buildings or whatever, I just kind of don't envision that being, a big driver of such a cost increase. Is it just the cost of a building that we're going to cut our capacity by half, or you're proposing, or,
I guess I'll clarify one thing.
yes?
It's actually a pretty tight site when you, to make sure that the sanitation district can continue operating as they operate today. And we have a constraint where the original layout, we had everything along the creek edge, but we are not allowed to put anything within 50 feet of the creek. And so that makes layout.
And nobody thought of that when you first made your first layout? The riparian, setback laws? No? Sorry, I
were
interrupted you.
aware of it. We thought that since it was a developed parcel that was already paved and had a concrete bank right outside of it, that we'd be able to construct within that area. But, I mean, that's not the big driver. That's just an example of constraints that start to squeeze the footprint. Second part of the question was on the cost of building. I think we're still grappling with the costs. Honestly, I think Chris can give an example. The building they just built a couple of years ago in Camarillo is much less expensive than what we're estimating to build a very similar building right now. And that's just kind of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate you also sharing, market scenarios, particular examples. But if you did want to go for an example, you could pick and choose, what's more, what's less. But I hope we can do, because at some point it's just it doesn't make too much, or maybe what makes sense is to hit the pause button or something, or walk away for $4 million that we've already spent on this. And then be in the vice and have to do it later, with another hairy drought. But I want to bring one other thing up with this ground mixing, and you're probably the one to ask. Did you guys do geology testing on that ground? Because around this area, and I live in the next neighborhood over, we have a lot of tar. One of my neighbors decided to rebuild their pool, and they've run into this bedrock of tar, and it's not like exactly granite, but it's very it's something to really deal with. So I hope I wouldn't want you to run into any. Well, it could be a good surprise because it's firm; it's not subject to liquefaction. Or have you done some tests?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the more heavily investigated sites that I have come across. Between all the prior work that's been done on the sites, I think there's been at least 3 geotechnical investigations. So yeah, including one specific for this project, so boring exactly where our building is going to be. And so the recommendations that have come from that are direct results of the investigation that we did this past year. Casey, just to respond to your question earlier, I was just wanted to make sure I had the right numbers and exactly the right information. So that's why I wanted to look it up. So there was a reduction of about $180,000 off the general conditions for the facility. There was actually an adder for some of the site work from the 50% based on some information that we got. We are believe we can move forward with a smaller equalization tank. The original 50% design had a 200,000 gallon EQ tank. And depending on whether or not we pursue 2 trains or 3 RO trains, we may be able to reduce that either to around 100,000 gallons or down to, I think, 80,000 gallons is what they currently have estimated. So that's a significant reduction in the construction costs for that EQ tank. We've got about $1 million off the building itself from a reduced square footage and adding a canopy or changing some of the processes from being inside the building to a canopy. I'm going to estimate this next one, but around $500,000 reduction on the process equipment, either from pipelines, material changes, or otherwise. That number increases to $2.6 million if we're going forward with that half-capacity approach. And then there's about a $300,000 decrease on our pump station clear well. So after our treatment system, now we're going to equalize that volume of water and send it off to our injection wells. We're trying to move forward with a smaller EQ tank there. And then again, modifying our geotechnical improvements from the deep soil mixing to the helical anchors. And then the reduction in pipeline diameter for a conveyance from 12 to 10 inches. Those are sort of the principal. So it's kind of we looked at everything we could to reduce costs.
Thanks.
So I'll just say, I agree with Shirley, and I'm thinking about the early numbers that we first were looking at, which really were, I think, in like the mid-20s years ago, and it was actually supposed to be up and running by now. And it's certainly a shame about the grant, and I know we're doing everything we can to maybe try and get that new one. We'll know about that this month, so that'll be informative. And I can understand that inflation played a role, frankly, because of where we have been. But my focus is more on the scope. And my focus is more on not just scope in terms of where we thought we were, like all those initial diagrams, the carp water was right up against that wall. Craig, I know you know the one I'm talking about, right up there. So it's going from 2 people to 4. It's going from now having to have a facilities for these people that we now have, and then the chemicals, and then the pilot, which resulted in us having to make some changes. So you have that kind of scope that was beyond scope creep, but now you're saying let's now cut this down from 1,000, which was already very small, to 650, and we're hoping that gives us what we need, but it's also, it is still pretty high cost. So, I'm kind of looking at that too, and as I said years ago, my concern was that we're so small here, and I was always concerned, to your point, Shirley, that we didn't have the volume, or that we were just gonna make it. And so this is a lot of money now to spend on what is not even 1,000, but 650. So obviously, I'm very concerned, and I commend everybody on the work that has happened in the past few weeks since we finally discovered this, and also the grant that we ended up not getting, or has been cut back. But I just think that I'm just getting a little bit concerned. Because I was concerned in the beginning about the volume, I was concerned about the cost, and now we've gone so high from I don't know what it was, 25 to 70. But again, that's notwithstanding all the hard work you've done. So if we could just come up with a cost-effective phase 1, if that would get us where we needed to go, and we were sure about all those variables, which we were not recently, then maybe we still have some work to do, and we'll see what happens. But I'm a little concerned.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment. Bob, when we started this, and I wasn't even around when you guys did, but was the factor of non-available state water and the cost of it factored into the reducing the cost of the purification project? Because obviously, yeah, if it costs us $3,000 an acre foot to do this now, or 3.5, how much are we saving by not bringing in the 1,000 acre feet of state water that they wouldn't give it to us in the first place?
Yeah, it varies depending on the situation. In drought, in drought periods, we paid $1 million for 700 acre feet, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And that was before delivering and treating it. And so, it gets very expensive during the height of a drought to access additional water, supplemental water. And it goes to why we're doing all of this work in the first place, why we started down this road, and that is there is a need. If we say at the 24th meeting, let's just put a pin in it, we'll deal with it later, and there will be a time when we are in a drought again, and we may not be so lucky. As in 2016, we were fortunate enough, Lake Kachuma was down to 15,000 acre feet, zero, I think it's second or third year of zero allocation out of Kachuma. State water was zero allocation. We were looking at that point, if we wouldn't have had rain in 2017, probably a 50% reduction in water deliveries. And so that's not going to be a one-time event. That will come again. And, I think one way to look at this is the loss that's going to occur if we say to our customers, you have to cut back by 50%. And we're not going to do voluntary, we're going to do mandatory reductions. And so that's the alternative. There aren't really other projects that are any cheaper than this project. Desal's going to be as or more expensive. So that's kind of where we're at.
Right, and that's actually my point. I think environmentally, the purification approach is more responsible than desal, number one. Number two, we need to also, as we say, yeah, this goes up, how much money are we going to save, let's say, over a 20-year period of not having to buy expensive water, or whatever happens to the state project, if it falls apart, there is no water. So to me, this makes so much sense. It'd be a shame to even reduce the scope. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, that's how I feel. So it is.
So just our last slide is just talking about, we'll be back here in 2 weeks with rate information. And what we wanted to do tonight was hear your questions, concerns, see if there's any more information we can come back with as well. And we'll be talking as a team tomorrow as far as some of the scenarios to make sure that are run. And so I think we should definitely look at, a high cost. If we get more escalation, what does that look like? Anyway, so we'll be back in a couple weeks. We'll have that information, and hoping to provide you with enough information to help make some decisions on next steps. If you guys think of anything else you have questions on, please let Bob know. We'll come back.
Yeah, and just kind of behind the curtain, we're essentially at the point where we're at a standstill engineering-wise. We're not moving forward with anything right now because we're trying to figure out which direction we're going to go, and it really depends on your input and your decision on whether we want to keep moving forward to finish this design and even bid it, and maybe we check back in at that point where we actually have a final price, or what we call a GMP, or do we proceed with a half project and then, see what the price is? Or do we put a pin in it and just say, we gave it a college try and, these are the circumstances? What we need to know from you is, what is the next step?
Can I ask you a question for the next time you come?
Yep.
So when we have the updated rate, potential rate structure, can we see it from a time or from a point of view without cap period to a implementation of cap, what that difference is? Not like, don't build upon the increases we've already incorporated for like debt servicing and stuff? Does that make sense what I'm saying? So like if you say, okay, we're expecting rates to go up 15% more than we already went up 7.5%. Can we see that like from a point of view from cap doesn't exist or will never exist, or cap will exist at the current estimated cost? The difference between not existing and now is 20% and not build upon the increases that have already been approved. Does that make sense? Am I saying that clearly?
Yeah, so,
Like the actual direct cost of cap on a
yeah,
bill.
we can do that. So just in real simple numbers, what was approved in '23 was about $2 million, $2.5 million, I think, additional revenue over, over what would have normally been raised in rates.
Sure.
Now it's
Three and a
whatever,
half
yeah,
or
three and a
something.
half, 3.5 or 4. So, that graph is going to look like a line and then another line that bumps up and then basically is parallel later on, starting in 2027 or 2028. So we can do that in a graphic way, and you can look at that if you'd like. But
Yeah, or numerical, like if what is an average customer going to see? What will their difference be between cap and not cap? Am I going to go from 75 to 150? Am I
yeah,
going to go from
year
70 to
by
90?
year, we can do that.
Yes.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
But can we also then keep an eye on the cost of state water, what that's going to be over the next 20 years? The increases in the cost of state water?
Or all water supplies, I think, yeah.
Right,
would
but
be-
isn't state water more expensive than Kachuma?
State water, yes, but Kachuma is definitely increasing in costs, and groundwater is also increasing in cost.
So we probably should have those comparisons also then. So
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah, because Kachuma is just basically the federal fees that aren't that significant per acre foot, I think. But it's a big percentage because it used to be $25 and now it's $180 or something like that. But
Well, it's also Cater treatment plant costs, treatment costs.
and yeah, and also our neighbors dropping out of that scenario and
Right.
going to diesel. It's really complicated. But also, I wanted to know on your other thing, I guess maybe I shouldn't change it, because I'm just wondering why our water projections, why is Kachuma, going down, Kachuma Lake?
Yeah, so in our urban water
Because our
management,
neighbors aren't using it anymore, we have to pay for it, so that's my next question.
well, our urban, I'm assuming you're talking about the availability of Kachuma is going down?
Yeah, I guess it's the state, the CCWA report or something. It's the report where we
Yeah.
get our water.
Yeah. So the reason why that reflects our urban water management plan, and the reason why it goes down in our urban water management plan is because it's anticipated that environmental priorities are going to reduce, and drought, historic drought are going to reduce that allocation by about 20%. So we expect that normally we get 2813 in a normal year from Kachuma, that will go down to, I think, 24, 2200 per year.
It's kind of a guess.
It is a guess, but there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of work from both sides of the issue that's been done.
From 2,813 acre feet to 2,250. Yeah, I would think Kachuma would be one source that should increase because Montecito's using less, and I don't know if Santa Barbara's cut back that much, but I was kind of surprised at that figure because I thought it probably our share would at least go up.
Well, it doesn't work by shares. It's a 25,714 per year is the contracted amount from the Bureau to the Kachuma members. And I don't think anyone's interested in giving up their Kachuma water rights So even though Montecito or Santa Barbara is not using as much because of desal, I don't think they want to relinquish any of it.
I see. That's interesting. We have to pay the difference. Well, that's just for the treatment of it.
The treatment is, yeah.
And we
it's-
don't have to pay, if they use less, we don't have to pay higher comb budget or anything. It's just the treatment.
That's right.
Oh, okay. So then they, of course, yeah, especially if they can sell it out of of course, maybe we can buy water cheaper from them. Right of first refusal. But anyway, okay, I see what you mean. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 7C, consider draft ordinance 24-1, moving Carpinteria Valley Water District from a drought stage 1 to drought stage 0 for action. Bob?
Okay, kind of flipping from one idea to another here. We're going from a current stage drought 1 to potentially a stage drought 0, and that's because we had 2 consecutive wetter than average years. And I'll just say that's not a normal. Don't expect that to normally happen. This has been extraordinary for the last 2 years. The amount of water that's come into the Kachuma watershed, and as well as into the groundwater basin. Lake Kachuma spilling for a second year in a row. State water is 100% allocation in 2023, and it's now 30% for 2024. Groundwater levels have increased 5 to 30 feet across the basin, and demands are lower. So all of these have caused staff to conclude that there's no longer a need for a drought stage, and so the ordinance that you saw last month is moving the drought stage from 1 to a 0. So kind of the schedule, we presented this draft ordinance a month ago. So tonight what we're looking to do is consider that ordinance for adoption. If we do adopt, the ordinance will go into effect on April 25th. That's the beginning of a billing cycle. And what that will do is after the 25th, the bills will no longer have a drought surcharge on them. Just FYI, the change in revenue expected from this ordinance will be a decrease in about $800,000 a year for district revenues. That has been or was incorporated last year into the rates analysis to make sure that we have sufficient revenue.
I move to adopt ordinance 24-1.
Polly seconds.
Okay, well, that's our recommendation, so great.
So we got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? The roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Winkert?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Then we got item 7D, consider adoption of resolution 1154, making the commitments and publishing a report required by CCWA Resolution 92-1 and 92-2 for action. Bob?
Yeah, this is a resolution we're required to pass every year. It was part of the coastal branch and local facilities EIR that was done in the 90s. And it basically identified that if state water was going to be brought in, that it would benefit groundwater basins in Santa Barbara County because it would be replacing, excessive overdraft of groundwater. And so in order to demonstrate that, we have to adopt this resolution, which is essentially a report. And the report has to do 3 things. It has to state how we've offset groundwater overdraft, has to give a reasonable estimate of total supplies available and the available water for ensuing years and amount of state water necessary. So in the resolution, you'll see this little graph or little table here that talks about the groundwater condition. And if you look at the recently adopted GSP, there is a number, a water budget in there that if you add up the withdrawals and the accretions of water into the groundwater basin, the long-term overdraft's about 407 acre-feet per year. Now, that number reflects 2 droughts in the period, so it's not quite the standard way of determining what your overdraft is, because normally what you would do is you'd take a wet cycle and a dry cycle, and then you'd figure out that term, what the overdraft is. But this is a little bit more conservative. And so the report asks the water district to identify its portion of overdraft. And so what I did was I looked at the percentage of extraction for the district compared to the percentage of the extraction for the private pumpers, and then I took the ratio of that 407 and calculated what the annual average overdraft was for the district. That's from 1985 to 2012. And so that came out to 144 acre-feet per year. And then I took the total amount of state water during that same period and divided it by the number of years, and that came out to 369 acre-feet per year. So we are actually taking state water, and it is offsetting overdraft. Again, the idea is to look at a longer period, or kind of project out a longer period. So with now being hopefully in a wet cycle, what we'll see is we'll see more recharge occurring in a shorter period of time, less water being extracted. In fact, the district has reduced its extraction significantly from 2,000 to 1,000 in the last 2 years. We'll continue to do that. 1,000 is below the average of 1,400 that we've been taking historically. So then the other table in here is the estimated available water, which Director Johnson was talking about, and why the Kachuma projection for long-term is 2,250. And that's, again, as I said, what we put in the urban water management plan for long-term water supply availability, because there is environmental pressure on that project, quite a bit of environmental pressure. It's a steelhead habitat, and that has significant bearing on what the Bureau will do in the future with respect to the new contract that's coming. And so we just, to be conservative again, assume 25% reduction over the long term. Groundwater basin, we also are conservative, 1,000 acre-feet for the near term and 1,000 acre-feet for the future years. And then again, we used the 60% reliability number for the state water project. We have 2,200 acre-feet of allocation, 60% of that's 1,320. So available water supply is for near terms around 5,150 and long term 4,570. So if you look at the near term demands, if you recall, we lowered our baseline. Last year, 23-24 was actually 3,070, which was significantly lower than baseline. This year, 3,500 is the projected number. So again, still a little bit below baseline. And then the new baseline, 3,800, is used for the long term. So what that means is we have more supply than demand. So there's zero requirement for state water. That doesn't mean we won't take state water. It just means that there's not a requirement to. So staff's recommendation is to adopt Resolution 1154.
Polly makes a motion to adopt Resolution 1154.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? A roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Wingerden?
Yes. Item number 7E, consider customer credit requests per District Rule 15A4 for account 11115505-09 in the amount of $445.50 for action. You want to take this?
Yes. Okay, so we had
Go
a
ahead.
customer that back in February during one of the rain events, the wind uprooted a large oak tree, which ripped a 2-inch line that they had on their property. And the location of the line, I guess, was in a canyon, so they didn't see it right away. So they used on average, they used 10 units, they used 334, so they got an $1,800 just water bill. So this credit is just 25% of the amount above their normal average. If the credit is approved, they will be required to sign up for Ion Water so they can receive the alerts. Because they were on a different pressurized system, I guess, and so it didn't affect them, so it wasn't obvious to them that they had lost water pressure because of the break, so.
Wait, did you say they were on, they were?
They were not, but if the credit is approved, that's a requirement that we have.
But I
is
thought
that
it was a
they-
requirement that we would reimburse them only if they're on
That's what I'm saying, if the credit is approved, we'll require that they sign up for Ion Water. They are not on Ion Water, or were not when this happened, so.
I was under the impression that they had to be on Ion Water, or that we wouldn't consider a credit.
No, the policy reads that if the board approves a credit, you have to sign up for Ion Water.
Okay. Are you recommending it?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve it.
I second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Wieren?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Then item number 7F, consider appointing Lisa Silva, Carpinteria Valley Water District Board Secretary for action. Bob?
Yes.
So moved.
I was gonna say, do
Holly
I need to say anything?
Holly seconds.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Wieren?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Then we got number 8, 8A, COMB Board Meeting, March 25, 2024. Polly?
Thank you. Just a few things. We approved a letter that will go out to the CDFW Commission from me regarding their significant study that they did on the Southern California steelhead. We added our input. It was important that we get the right tone, so we were kind of firm but polite, because we had a problem with the way that they were using data in tracking the steelhead. So that was kind of a big deal, because it goes to our growing relationship with CDFW and trying to recommend different ways that they can adopt better data for a better outcome of the steelhead. We also approved some fish passage improvement projects for the upcoming budget. These are for all of the crossings that we didn't get to last year that were, if they weren't damaged by the storms last year, they were damaged by the storms this year, and are either partially or wholly blocking fish passages. So many of the crossings that we have on Crater Creek will be worked on over the next budget cycle. The total is $300,000. We normally make it a point to go after grant funding, but there just was not any, so this will be offset by the renewal and the trust funds. And we'll be meeting next month to go over the full budget for the upcoming year. We have tentatively reviewed the capital improvement projects, which includes all the work down here, so that's on the project so far. That's good. We expanded the COMB D3 permit process to include, it's called a NDPES. This was at a recommendation from the state. It expands the role of COMB, and so we thought it was a better fit. So that was also good news. At the time of the meeting, we were releasing through the outlet works, but it was right before the big storms that came, so we are assuming that it was going through, that they were going to open the gates, but I don't have any word of that. Bob, I don't know if you do. One thing that was kind of interesting is that for the first time that anybody remembers, we really were spilling, and Tim took a picture of it spilling, which is a no-no, but the Bureau didn't seem very concerned about it. So rather than releasing, it was literally spilling.
Over the flashboards?
There was a picture.
753.
Yeah, I know, yeah. It was
wow.
like, but they didn't seem all that concerned about it. And actually, I think that's it. Oh, FEMA still continues. We're still working with them. one of the projects that we handed in too late, just because we didn't know about it, probably isn't going to get funded, but we think we can offset those costs. So we're working with them on a regular basis, and the money's coming in slowly to cover the works that were done from the damages a couple of years ago. That concludes my report.
Thank you. So then we got item number 8B. The CCWA Operations Committee meeting was already discussed by Meso. So then we got item number 8C, CCWA Board Meeting, March 28, 2024. Shirley?
Yes, so we started off in closed session, no reportable action, but went on for about an hour. It's a bit long. And then we had the consent calendar, and then we had the water situation, supply situation report, which, they went through all the reaches, and the snowpack is looking better, and most of the reservoirs are full, except San Luis Reservoir is full, but not for us. Half of the reservoir is federal water and half is usually state water, but the state water is less than half right now, and that is not the same as, say, Shasta, which is I just read the other day, it's almost completely full. And before, the reason why San Luis and our allocation is from 15 to 30 now, but only at 30, with all this rain we're getting. And because San Luis, as you all know, it's not a natural reservoir, it's pumped. So it gets full when there's state water to put in there. And before, the fact that our allocation was low was kind of expressed in a little bit vague terms of senior water rights for Lake Oroville and some other issues. And now it seems like the main issue, which is all in the news as well, is that, the whole concept of state water is not to take water from the delta when we're in a drought and there's a shortage and the poor fish are gagging, but to leave it there for a healthy ecosystem and take the water when its opportunity happens from the sky, it's pouring down, it's going into the ocean, let's grab it. And so, they had the two main pump stations, working to take up that water, and they have taken a lot of the water, and there's figures, I don't remember how many million, or hundreds of thousands of acre feet they have managed to increase storage of rainwater. But as you take more water, you're going to get more fish, especially if there's more healthy fish populations. And so they exceeded the maximum fish kill in the pump, entrapment. And so they had to dial way back on the pumping. And they, still, I think, and that's what's holding them back now, too, is there's got to be some science for this or something, because that's a situation while we're still only 30%, is because they've exceeded the, unless we want to wipe out these species, in all of our waterways, they've exceeded the maximum. So I guess they're still working on that. But that's an interesting piece. Yes, the preliminary budget for the CCWA is from 23 to 24 budget was 58 million, and the next projected budget is 59.4 million. And they term this as total payments from the contractor members of the CCWA. So I kind of like that, very plain terms. This is how much money you all are going to pay us. This is in our budget. It's not all sliced and diced, so you can't really compare it. So that's pretty good. And it's an increase of 2.3%. So, and it's not finalized yet, but, so we went over the budget. And so that is pretty much and we discussed the transfer, the new water management contract terms, and pretty much what Maso said is it's not finalized yet. We're working on the terms. So that's it.
Thank you, Shirley. So then we got item number 8D, consider attendance to the 21st Annual Water Conservation Showcase on April 4, 2024 for compensation. Bob?
I'll hand this over to Director Johnson. She attended and would like to report, and then I'll call for approval for reimbursing her for the event.
Okay. All right, yeah, this is the second one of the, it's the PG&E sponsored water seminar, and I'm really surprised that they are really of high quality. I went to the last one, learned a lot. So I went to this, it was a Zoom event, and they also had meeting in person in San Rafael. And the only problem with that is sometimes they didn't cut the sound on, so you could see someone setting up their talk and giving an introduction, which I sometimes missed. But they do have the written summary, so that's good. So I'd like to report on the stormwater management case studies, which is the main reason I went, because I'm really interested to see what people are doing with stormwater, free water. And then the other one I went to was detecting leaks, cost and water savings. I think Mazzo went to a seminar on water budgets, which I was going to go to, but she thought she picked this one up, so I did leaks. And also, I will do a little report on Water Energy Nexus products to save water and energy. So starting off with a case study of stormwater management, it was presented by Breck Bucknam. Robert Dern, the other fellow, was a no-show. And so I was a little disappointed in this. I mean, I think Mr. Bucknam really knew what he was talking about, but he oh, there it is. But they, underwent this comprehensive plan to try to do mutual benefits for, it's called unpave LA, get rid of the asphalt and the cement, and a multi-benefit. So what he's doing basically kind of tied in with our water budget aerial modeling and stuff, but actually, and what he led with, and I think they've been working on this for 3 or 4 years, not 1 square foot of pavement has been unpaved in this effort. Although there have been, and I try to follow them, some major stormwater capture and groundwater rejuvenation or trying to recapture that in the San Fernando Valley. It's very expensive because they're dealing with very big budgets, but they've been successful on those things. So I don't want to leave the impression that there's been no pavement, no progress made in LA. But it just also shows you how you might kind of get stuck in the planning stage of these goals, and one piece of it that might be helpful of us is that, they showed various aerial algorithms, which looks like artwork you'd like to put up in your house or something. Some of it by parcel, some of it by square miles. So there's different ways of slicing and dicing. You can also see, a paved parking lot. You can see the heat coming up off that parking lot and drifting right over into the neighborhood, probably low-income neighborhood that doesn't have much greenery, and so they're dealing with water capture, water recycle, and also heat. So, and they started off using the Apple iCloud computers, and ended up spending about $500,000 on that for their modeling efforts. And they came to the conclusion that wasn't effective, so they bought a couple of computers, and they're doing it in-house for more flexibility, more control. And so the next one, which is tending the urban forest, long-term planning. And this might be also of interest to Polly. And I went on the tour, too, of Kachuma. They've had to plant thousands of oak trees as a mediation for the raising of the dam. So I think the general thing I learned is that there are some nurseries out there, and the wisdom and knowledge of you think that planting and vegetation it's been the human domain since we got out of the hunter-gatherer period, but there's a lot of new stuff coming out. And, Australia's a really gnarly place to be a tree, and they have some good trees there that are drought tolerant. They also talked about girding trees. We talk about that to protect our blacktop and stuff, and it's a way of controlling the roots. That will kill drought-tolerant trees more than other kinds. Don't do that. And and also, one of the things I thought was, and they mentioned a few kinds of oak trees and a few nurseries, which, to get drought-tolerant trees, which, might share that information, because it doesn't seem like it's that accessible across the board. You have to know where to go. And one of the things, one of the things they said, I think a lot of county or city, they have their criteria for if you yank a tree, you replace it, and a lot of times it stipulates you need to replace it with the 24-inch box tree, which is an older tree that's grown older, and it's in a big box. And they did a study, I don't remember what kind of trees it was, but it was kind of across the board, that 15-gallon tree seedlings do better. They require a heck of a lot less water to establish. And if you look at both the trees in a few years, like 4 or 5 years, the 15-gallon tree will be doing much better than the 24 box tree, because their roots were intact and they're growing better. I don't know, but it's a surprising find. So that is one good thing to know. And oak trees are biodiversity trees, and some of the other ones aren't so much. His favorite pine is the Torrey pine, the California Torrey pine, and we have the largest one in the state here in Carpinteria. And this is a very cute quote. It was kind of really upscale, all the things you can do, and you can think outside the box and put in vines if you don't want trees chewing up your blacktop. Is that this one woman who's a irrigation expert, and that was her education. She goes, and she introduces herself as a recovering irrigation expert because she's working on these drought situations and realizes that don't plant anything that once it's established you have to irrigate it. No irrigating stuff. So that was great. And then the leak seminar, here's an interesting thing, because I just asked Bob about this. I said, do our smart meters detect toilet leaks? Because toilet leaks are probably one of the most frequent residential leaks. And he said no, because it is intermittent. It leaks and then the tank fills up and then the tank's full and then it stops leaking. So you get these little, flush sensors that go on each toilet. They did some studies on this, and I'll cut to the chase. Even after they installed, the sensors, and that they notified the property owners, and this is in master meter, low-income housing, 49% of your flush water goes away to leaks, and 51% of the toilet water is used to flush the toilet. That's after they put in these things. So, everyone talks about low flush toilets, so it might be something that we can use in our Carpinteria, drought cooperation and landscaping efforts would be, toilet flush leak sensors. And then there's one other thing, Water Energy Nexus. They have a gadget that goes on water pressure reducer reduction devices that the water district would use to bring down the high pressure water to safe levels. And this little thing is like a turbo, and it can recycle that pressure back into the grid or into a storage place. It recaptures electricity lost in, and that can be substantial. I meant, really? Oh, you know, but, you know, it's what's it called? It's called conduit micro hydropower, and it is, I think they had one in-pipe energy, I think it's called. So, in case you're interested in a supplier of that. So, anyway, it was really informative, and, you know, I learned a lot, and so that's it.
Thank you, Shirley. That was very informational. Bob, you want to make that?
Yeah, so I'm looking for a motion and a second to
Polly makes a
approve.
motion to reimburse Shirley for her seminar.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Director Roberts?
Aye.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Van Weerden?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And number 9, the general manager report, none. Do we have a number 10?
Yes, we do.
Okay, then we go into closed session then.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're back in open session, and there's no reportable action on item number 10. Item number 11, consider dates and items for the agenda for the Carpinteria Valley Water District Board meeting of April 24, 2024 at 5:30 PM, Carpinteria City Hall, 5775 Carpinteria Avenue, Carpinteria, California. And we're hereby adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
That was pretty